Live online?
We are live.
All right. Good afternoon. It is 5:10. Thank you. 5:10 PM on April 3rd, 2024. And the DC State Board of Education working session is now called to order. This month's working session is being held in person at the Mary Junior meeting. However, in-person attendance is limited to state board members, staff, and guests. The working session is also being streamed live on the state board's YouTube page for members of the public to attend. Please visit SBOE.dc.gov to learn how to submit and or present testimony at a upcoming public meeting. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Executive Director Butler, please call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Williams. Representative Chang.
Present.
Representative Boulay. Representative O'Leary.
Here.
Representative Henderson.
Here.
Representative Best.
Present.
President Thompson.
Present.
Representative Reed.
Present.
Vice President Patterson.
Present.
Representative Kelly.
Present.
Representative Viaflor.
Present.
Representative Washington.
Present.
Representative Yard. Madam President, you have a form.
The quorum has been determined and the state board will now proceed with our working session. Again, welcome to our April working session. At this time, I'll share a couple highlights from the leadership report, because we actually have some things that are in depth a little bit later. I was holding the email, hopefully that we would get more information about the budget, but we will have some time to go in depth a little later today. Thanks to our staff for putting the highlights for our budget as an agency and some of the things from our budget letter. So they now have that information for us. We do have a couple of upcoming meetings. I want to flag both for OSCE and DME. Please respond back to my email if there are agenda items for those. The other things are just reminders, which I'm sure Executive Director will cover in her report, in which you already have emails around. One, I know Representative Williams is running behind today because he's at the kickoff for the high school voter registration contest. Kudos to him and everyone who worked to get that launched. Please make sure you are sharing things with your schools too. If you have not already, please respond back to Jen's email about committees so we can get those launched and kicked off and have work flowing through our committees. Those are really the big things that I wanted to flag. And again, we'll dive into the budget aspects a little bit later. Are there any questions about the leadership report? All right. Hearing none, I believe next we have the executive director report.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, members and guests. Update on work in the State Board office. So as of today, we are excited to say we have 2 new people starting on Monday. One is our procurement analyst. So we're very excited to have Mr. Ian Fernando to join our staff. And we're also be welcoming new admin and operations fellow, Ms. Cheyenne Hunter from Howard University. We will also just like at this time to say a huge thank you because this is the last meeting of any kind for our policy fellow, Ms. Rochelle. She has worked diligently with us over the last year. Our policies of gratitude and George, said, there's a whole shirt right there. And she will be leaving us to start a brand new full-time position on Monday. So congratulations, Rochelle, and thank you for all of your hard work. Like President Thompson said, we will get into the budget a little bit later, but just to update you on a few pieces. So in addition to the mayor's FY25 budget that was released today, she also released, while it's not publicly online, the FY24 supplemental budget, which includes $182,000 in personnel cuts for the state board and for the ombudsman's office. In addition to that, but over in addition separately, for the FY25 budget, the state board offices were granted $600,000 in capital funds for the renovation of our office space in the capital budget, which is a different budget than the operating budget. So if all goes well, we will be going under construction and fully virtual for a short period of time during construction next fiscal year, as they update our offices. So we are very grateful for that. We're excited. We're very grateful for DGA taking the time to come and walk through with us, and what we needed for the space and how we can get the space, to accommodate all of our growing agency needs. Next, update on Old Council Chambers. We received the update on yesterday that says the technicians and all the pieces, the wiring is complete. They are doing a demo and testing with the DGA staff and the mayor's office of communications this week, and they will be sending out an invite for us to do a demo next week. So it is hopeful that it will be fully hybrid, all the wiring will be connected, so that we will be able to have a hybrid meeting in May. I don't want to say April because I like to test things out before we invite people and then something that so we're going to be counting on a May launch of our hybrid meeting for our public. Again, if you have not already gotten on April 15th of this month, you will be getting your email. Please be on the lookout from Vega regarding your financial disclosure as elected officials. So that email should be coming to you on April 15th around about, I don't know if that's the weekend, but it should be coming close to that date. So everyone on the state board will receive that email. Please complete it by May 15th. Lastly, we are planning for our first agency-wide retreat. Will be May 17th for the entire agency, all offices. So we'll be dedicating the first half of that day to joint office communication and getting to know all the new people on our staff, including our new ombudsman that starts on April 22nd. And then the second half of the day, we'll break off into specific teams to do a deep dive into sort of those type of activities. So we look forward to sharing more with you about those activities. At this time, Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Butler. Do members have any questions about the executive director's report? Right, thank you again. We will now turn over the next 45 minutes of our meeting to the Office of State Superintendent of Education team, who will share updates on the social emotional learning plans.
Thank you so much. Always appreciate the opportunity to come and add to these working sessions where we get to work on specific issues of interest to both of us. And on this particular issue, social emotional learning standards, I know it's something that a lot of you are excited about. We are certainly excited about. A lot of people in the district are excited about. And so are really looking forward to the conversation today. And we'll turn it over to the great folks here from the Division of Teaching and Learning.
Thank you so much. Marcus, please.
Yes. Hi, Dylan. My name is Marcus Hughes. I serve as the school culture and climate specialist at OSSI, and I'm also a Ward 6 resident. It's my privilege to present to you again the draft standards of the DC K through adult social and emotional learning standard. Okay, here's just an overview of the agenda that I'll be covering during this presentation. And also I'll begin by providing a little bit of background information and then highlighting some of the amazing work that has taken place during our standards development process. So, these standards establish expectations for the social and emotional learning skills of DC public and charter schools serving K through adult learners. OSSI anticipates that social and emotional learning standards be implemented across all grade bands and subjects. While the standards focus on what is most essential, they do not describe all that can or should be taught. The standards define what all students are expected to know and be able to do rather than how teachers should teach. Next slide, please. Here's just an overview of our standard development timeline. And just as a note, we're here today to present a finalized SEL standards and the resolution of support to SBOE. Next. Throughout this process, OSSI collaborated with organization EduSolve and National SEL Expert Organization CASEL to provide consultative support throughout the standards development process. And to ensure local context, OSSI closely collaborated with the DC PS Becoming team, representatives from DC Charter LEAs and the DME's office throughout this process. Slide. We're extremely proud to have developed the standards through a collaborative process with stakeholders from a diverse range of educational institutions, agencies, and community organizations throughout the district. Presented is a list of stakeholder organizations, LEAs, and agencies that were involved, and we're thrilled to hear some of the testimonies of support from some stakeholders during the SBOE April meeting. March, I'm sorry. Stakeholder engagement public comment. During the public comment period, OSSI disseminated a survey, hosted 3 listening sessions, and conducted a student focus group. OSSI also presented the draft standards to the superintendent's advisory councils, which included DC teachers and principals from all 8 boards. As a result, OSSI engaged with over 20 community members, 27 students, 21 DC educators, and received over 320 unique comments on the survey. OSSI reviewed each comment and received actionable feedback from community stakeholders that informed the standards revisions. The standards are structured beginning with the 5 DC specific competencies, which are self-awareness, self-management, social and cultural awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making and agency. Each competency is accompanied by a standard, grade band, and then embedded indicators. In response to public feedback, OSSI has made revisions to the draft standards. The feedback themes that were addressed were the needs for alignment and consistency, comprehensive development and integration, documentation, clarity, cultural considerations. Slide, please. Implementation challenges and support, and equity and inclusivity in real world relevance. Here's a more in-depth look at stakeholder feedback within each competency, starting with self-awareness. Within this competency, stakeholders recommended that OSSI include indicators related to understanding how cultural and societal factors shape learners' identity, including awareness of learners' actions and behavior in high-level grade bands, incorporate more indicators in higher grade bands, specifically 6th and 8th grade. A full appendix of revised standards and indicators have been provided within the memo. And the following tables will display a few examples of revisions that's been made in direct response to stakeholder feedback, of which I like to highlight some of the following relevant revisions. So that would be self-awareness code SA.3-5.16, which is identify the roles in their family and community and how these roles impact their identity. SA.6-8.6, which is interprets emotions in a variety of situations that lead to positive choices. And SA.12-8.13, which is analyzes the effect that taking responsibility or not taking responsibility have on oneself and others. Next slide, please. Here's a more in-depth look at stakeholder feedback themes within competency self-management. Stakeholders recommended that OSSI utilize language that reflects the learner's intentions, addressing motivation and purpose, providing relevant examples across grade bands, and emphasize the importance of framing standards positively. Here again are a few examples of the revised indicators in response to stakeholder feedback, of which I like to highlight a few relevant revisions. And that would be self-management code SM.K-2.7, which is approaches challenges and obstacles with optimism and motivation with adult support. SM.6-8.2, uses self-regulating strategies to manage emotions. And that's examples of breathing, mindfulness, self-affirmation, journaling, artistic expression, and exercise. And code SM.12-8.9, which demonstrates a growth mindset and perseveres when dealing with challenges and adversity. Slide, please. Here's an in-depth look at stakeholder feedback theme within competency, social, and cultural awareness. Here, stakeholders recommended that OSSI incorporate a broad approach to addressing diversity, religion, and ethnic identities. Lead with the broad concepts such as bringing curiosity, care, and respect, and use relational examples to provide and prompt reflection to help students better understand and internalize concepts. Again, you have tables has a few of the revised indicators, of which I like to highlight some of the relevant revisions, which would be social and cultural awareness code SCA Point 3-5.10, which is identifies discrimination and exclusion of individuals and groups based upon perceived differences with adult support. SA point 6-8.9, which is recognizing a response to culturally sensitive situations using positive social and communication skills. And SA point 12-8.10, which is generates positive choices, engages in civic activities, and proactively advocates for oneself and others across settings, examples of school, community, work, and personal relationships. Slide, please. Here's a more in-depth look at stakeholder feedback theme within competency relationship skills. Stakeholders recommended that OSCE emphasize equity considerations, including age, race, gender, identity, ability, disability, sexual orientation, language, etc. The need for a comprehensive approach that includes risk-taking, vulnerability, and interdependence, and make strides related to providing constructive feedback, seeking to understand, build shared meaning, and cohesive teamwork more distinctly. Again, examples are provided for you on the table, in which I like to highlight the following relevant revisions, which is Relationships Code RS.K-2.1, uses positive language and behavior to communicate. Examples, taking turns, sharing with others, using compliments to encourage others, using active listening skills. Code RS.6-8.4, which is identifies and shows concerns for the feelings of others through kindness, responsiveness, and engagement. And RS.12-8.9, which offers, accepts, and evaluates feedback, including constructive criticism to help improve personal growth. Next slide, please. And lastly, here's a more in-depth look at stakeholder feedback theme within competency decision-making in an agency. Here, stakeholders recommended that OSCE include language that fosters a sense of responsibility that extends to oneself, others, and community, utilizing reflective and invitational language, incorporate congruency where responsible decisions align with values, purposes, and belief, and embed indicators that evaluate and measure decision-making in a way that respects individual privacy and autonomy. And lastly, of course, you have the examples of the indicators that were revised based on stakeholder feedback, of which I like to highlight for the following relevant revisions, which is decision-making and agency code DMA.K-2.3 considers how possible solutions to a problem align with the norms of one's class or community with adult support. DMA.6-8.10, which is recognized the importance of making decisions as a group, which aligns with the shared goal. And DMA.9-11.5, which is considers ethical and safety and societal factors and evaluates the consequences when making decisions. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of some of the major revisions that OSCE undertook as direct feedback by the SBOE memo. These include adding an introduction section, coding system, and considerations of organizing these standard structures, of which OSCE did fulfill, and also to ensure clarity of standards. Over 40 indicators were removed and 100 indicators were amended. Provide on more revisions that OSCE undertook as direct feedback by SBOE, including the need for vertical alignment, standard specifications regarding key terms usage, and the increased recognition of diverse student experience. OSCE recognized the importance of fostering the development of safe and respectful online habits among all students in DC. The table includes a subset of indicators designed to promote digital citizenship. Next slide. OSCE also recognized the significance of ensuring that all DC students have the opportunities to develop and hone peer advocacy and conflict resolution skills, including skills related to bystanders intervention. The table includes examples of relevant indicators that are designed to promote conflict resolution skills. For our next steps. We are looking forward to the upcoming support of SBOE the vote to support the SEL standards during the April 2024 public meeting. OSCE will develop resources and support to aid DC educators in implementing these new standards in the spring and summer. And OSCE is on track and anticipates all DC schools to be ready to implement the K-12 SC social and emotional learning standards for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and we're happy to take any questions that anyone has about the information that you presented here tonight or the information we've sent in the meeting.
Have you had an opportunity to look through the proposed budget? I know it was just today, but to see a lot of the cuts that we saw were for federal funding that's gone away for a lot of positions that were in this kind of area, like social emotional learning. Is what you're presenting to us tonight still implementable with what's been proposed in the mayor's budget? Or do you see any challenges with or modifications needed to what you're presenting?
Thanks so much for the question, Representative Goulet. I'm happy to tackle this. OSSI has two school culture climate specialists, Marcus and another colleague that works on a slightly different portfolio. She does a lot of the implementation work specifically around our restorative justice programming. Those positions are stable and include future year funding and FY. They're funded now, they include future year funding, and the implementation support, or the funds that we are using for implementation support for these standards are a federal recovery fund. So our ESSER funds, we allocated $250,000, $250,000 to work with EduSolve, which is a national expert in the space, both to support development of these standards and to support development of resources to support the standards. That work is already underway right now because we have heard loud and clear from our LEAs that what they are excited for is for these standards to be finalized and then for support in implementing them. And it's not a mistake that this work lives in our Division of Teaching and Learning alongside our academic content work. So part of the work that Marcus, Jessica, and the rest of my team is doing is pulling together resources across our academic content areas that will actually integrate the SEL standards into the other professional learning supports that we can provide, which is a long way of saying, yes, we have sufficient resources in order to move forward with full implementation of these standards.
And at the school level, you'll have the personnel needed to actually teach the standards to the students. So it's not just the execution of the standards, making sure that they get to the students or get to the teachers, but we will have enough teachers and professionals to be able to actually convey these to the students and teach them, you're saying.
Our LEA leaders are the best people to talk about school level staffing better than anyone here tonight, but at a state educational agency level, we're sufficient that we have the resources that we need in order to provide those supports.
Well, I'll follow up with them then, because I think my concern was not that you have the ability to get it done on your end. It was, do we have the personnel actually in our schools still staffed there with some of these reductions we're seeing to be able to effectively teach our students these standards? Because I think that's the concern a lot of people have, is that with these positions being cut, the ability to do things like this is going to be diminished. So I appreciate the answer to the question now, and I'll follow back up with DCPS.
My question is the same question I always ask, and it has to do with, when we were talking about social studies standards, we had social studies teachers. When we were talking about financial literacy, at least we had people who had done that. So it seems to be a completely different cadre of teachers, of people that are going to be teaching this course. My first question is it an elective? Is it just for what grades? We talk about all grade levels, right? So who is going, because we're talking about a couple of months from now. Okay, when Marcus was talking about 24, 25, that's August. I'm very skeptical about how is it going to be set up, and you're saying the LEAs set it up, but I don't know if the LEAs know what they're setting up. I don't have that deep faith in that. Because this is a very much needed curriculum, and it's something that we as teachers do every day, but we never had a curriculum for it. But I don't understand the timing of it.
I love this question, Representative O'Leary, because it gives me a chance to clarify for you, for the group, and for anyone listening that we know that SEL looks different in every single school and in every single setting based on individual students' needs. But in many cases, we do not have a separate SEL teacher, a separate SEL course. Instead, what we have is full integration of social emotional learning concepts into the academic content work that's happening. And this is critically important because it enables educators to take advantage of the instructional day and maximize learning time. So for example, you can see SEL when you have students that are developing competency in a difficult mathematics concept. And they will take 5 or engage in starfish breathing in order to enable themselves to refocus. You can see SEL when you see students interacting and engaging with each other in the hallway when they are passing each other and able to act appropriately. Marcus talked through some of the important work that these standards will help ensure that our students and our educators have the knowledge and skills to engage in effectively around conflict resolution. And so we would not, in most cases, we would not envision a separate class for SEL, but instead we would see this work fully integrated throughout the school day, which only answers part of your question. The other part of your question is really, really critical, which is how are we building educator capacity to fully integrate this work and to do it well. And that's why the resources and supports that we are developing alongside our LEAs. So just as we did with social studies, we convened a writing group of DC educators that included representatives from DCPS, from our DC public charter schools, to actually come together, talk about the work that they were already doing in this space, and then layer on top how this work can build on it. And these standards build on a national model, the CASTLE framework, which is important because many of our LEAs in DC are already using and leveraging that model. So this work in different ways, in different facets, is underway in many places across DC. But what we haven't had is, as a jurisdiction, a uniform set of guidelines that we have adopted as final and have said, this sets the floor. Marcus talked about how standards do not describe all that can and should be taught or how it will be taught, but instead they really serve as a baseline that we can build off of. And so if the work that you're describing is the good, hard, fun work of implementation, and the way that it happens is the way that all of our implementation work happens. We provide resources and support, and that looks like lots of different things. We're excited that we're SEL. We're hosting a citywide convening on June 12th, and we sure do hope that everyone here will join us. It's going to be a fantastic event. We're bringing together LEAs and educators to begin working with these standards and figuring out how they'll be implementing them in their school environments. And we actually are designing that day to support LEAs that are in different stages of implementation. So an LEA, a school and educator that may be newer to these concepts, will be able to follow a certain pathway. An LEA that has significant expertise, but instead is using to tweak or to share best practices or elevate their understanding, will be able to follow a different pathway. One other piece that didn't come out in Marcus's presentation, but I know is on this group's radar because we talked about it in the context of the report card conversation, is we do have a tool in place that will help us understand, or we will have a tool in place that will help us understand how implementation is going, which is our school culture climate survey. As this group knows, we're working with 16 LEAs through an advisory cohort this year, and next year we'll be bringing that tool to scale. We'll be doing census implementation of that tool across all of our LEAs, establishing baseline, which we can then use to crosswalk with our SEL standards and say, as a teaching and learning team, okay, this is where we're seeing our LEAs that need a lot of support, or this is where we're seeing our middle schools need a lot of support in implementing XYZ competency. So what you're talking about is the actual real work of changing a child's experience in not just their classroom, but in the school building, in the lunchroom, in the gymnasium, in the hallway, at recess. And it is not the case that on day one, we will be able to walk into every classroom in DC and see every one of these standards in place, but that's not the goal. The goal is that these standards establish the expectation, and then we're able to work with our educators in order to find out where and how additional supports are needed. Does that help?
Big time. Thank you. I do have one question. Restorative justice. This seems to me, to be what restorative justice should be. And I just want to put another plug in for that. And please push the LEAs to make restorative justice work.
I will say we really appreciated the conversation that this body held at the public meeting in February around restorative justice, and then the conversation that this body held at the public meeting around SEL in March. We listened carefully and are in very close conversation with our partners, School Talk and then Restorative DC, on restorative justice in order to make sure that that programming is working across our city. I think it's fair to say that, as is always the case with implementation, that there are differences in implementation in different environments, and we are really excited to ensure that we have a strong, stable baseline of minimum expectations.
Vice President Patterson.
Ms. Ross, you brought up something that was very interesting to me as you answered Representative Boulet's question concerning implementation and how you were funding it. You were saying you were using ESSER, correct?
Correct.
And that also is some of the things that's coming down the pipe, also supported by ESSER funding as far as implementation. Are there FTEs that are tied to that once ESSER funding, because this is the last year of ESSER funding, that will go away, that helps with implementation? Will you guys lose some of that capacity after that to be able to support those type of things?
I love this question. Thank you. In our Division of Teaching and Learning team, no, this work is funded by FTEs that are locally funded or you mentioned other implementation work. So for things like our social studies work, that we're federally funded. And so neither Marcus nor Jessica on my team are ESSER funded, and we are being quite strategic with our vendor partner in terms of developing resources that are designed to be perennial. And so some of the work that's underway is a toolkit. We're also doing lots of train the trainer models where they will be able to deploy training on the front end, that then will be able to be turnkeyed in implementation as this work moves forward. So I do not see a vulnerability there. But I appreciate the question. It's something we've been very, very attentive to, because this work is so important, and we don't want the work that we've been able to catalyze with our ESSER funds to never actually come to scale and be well implemented.
Follow up on that, because what Representative Boulet brings up is really relevant, because as you guys help schools, LEAs, they're losing positions in FTEs, because I know this, because I know something that are happening at my job and stuff like that. Just want to be cognizant of that, being able to support those LEAs in the way that we possibly can, as long as we have those ESSER funds. Then we get into it once those ESSER funds are away, because a lot of our schools will lose a lot of the capacity to do things without a lot of support.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And I will say SEL, when implemented well, makes our educators' jobs better, and it makes our students' lives better. And so this is both a really important, these standards are both a really important tool to establish what students should know and be able to do, but also something that is going to improve school culture and climate, which we continually hear from our educators is really important in terms of sustaining them productively and enabling them to thrive in the profession.
I would just add that OSCE is being very intentional also about providing guidance to LEAs about their ESSER funding, especially in the late extension funding, and how they can direct those to be most impactful. So that is continuing work at the state.
Appreciate that.
Other questions?
One of the things we heard from our panel was how important it was for the adults in the building to demonstrate and display good practices. Are there any aspects of the supports that you're providing that speak to that?
I love this question because some of the work that we have done with our vendor partner was to establish the enabling conditions that need to be in place in order for SEL standards to actually live in a very concrete way at the school level and change student experiences. And we have as one of our 5 core strands, raising adult capacity, making sure that our adults have the SEL skills that they need. I believe we've also discussed with this group that these standards go through adult learners. That's important because these standards cover information that our adult learners should have, but it also serves as a really powerful signal to the adults in the building that these are skills that they should have. And so we are really, really excited to use these standards to change adult practice so that then adults will have the knowledge and skills that they need to change student behavior and practice.
One question? Anybody else? Yes.
I have a question.
I was asked about- go ahead.
Oh, no. First off, I just want to say thank you. These are excellent standards. I am a little worried, and it's not necessarily about like the development of the standards itself. It's about like what happened. I want to make sure it doesn't get lost in translation. And I know that like, especially when we talk about like, we want to make sure it's integrated within other things that we do. And unfortunately, a lot of times what that means is it just doesn't happen. And so like, how can we ensure, or how can we all work together to ensure that that isn't the case with this?
I love this question, right? Because if you integrate everything too much, then you can get to a space where nothing actually exists in its truest form. I think the school culture climate survey instrument is going to be our best tool to enable us to understand how implementation is going alongside our capacity as a team. And we are a small team, but to work with and support our LEAs, we were very strategic in development of these standards to set up 2 groups. We knew if we set up a writing group with 50 individuals that it would be very hard to make progress on a rigorous timeline. So we set up a small writing group pulling from our DC LEAs and educators. And then we set up a larger advisory cohort that is quite representative of our DC LEAs and includes lots of individuals who couldn't necessarily allocate the same amount of time that our the writing group spend great deal of time on these standards, but who have been close partners to us in this work and are now positioned to champion these standards. So we are planning to leverage them, to leverage our school climate tool to understand how implementation is going, and then to use the work that Marcus and Jessica, our school culture climate specialists, do regularly, alongside the work happening with our other vendor partners like School Talk, like Restorative DC, to help us understand how and where we may need to provide more implementation support. And the integration is going to be critical in order for all of these standards to be implemented well, but we can certainly envision a world where there could be an incident in school that it requires a certain group of students or a certain class to have some dedicated time working on a subset of the standards. We're excited to learn from that. And then on our team, our job is to make sure that we're elevating those examples of best practices so that they can be replicated in other environments where they will be successful. But what you're asking is the perfect question because it's actually how any of this makes a difference for kids. What does implementation look like? And I can sit here and talk to you today about our very well articulated plans, but this is actually something that we'll be much better prepared to speak to in 1 year's time and in 2 years' time. And we're happy to come back and do that because the power of all of this standards work is actually that it is setting a floor, but then the magic of it is what's happening in classroom.
Thank you. That's all.
So I have a couple questions, thoughts on the chart rolling together. You mentioned that, and I'm excited about this when you all have coming online. How are you all thinking about the current baseline when you say like we're looking to schools who have differing capacity? Like how do you know where there might be bright spots or where there might be areas that people need more support as you're looking to delineate?
Yeah, this is a great question. So when we put out a call for LEAs and entities to work with us on this process, we had a couple of LEAs that raised their hand and said, actually, this is our model. We believe wholeheartedly in social emotional learning. And as a school, this is something that we prioritized, and this is how we're prioritizing it. And we are ready to stand up and say we are really ready to showcase our work. Of course, always room for improvement. Most organizations and individuals in education have a growth mindset, and that's a good thing. We want to certainly promote and support that. And so we, this group heard Michael Lamb at DCPS talk about a coalition of the excited when he was talking about the work that DCPS is doing within schools. And our, when we put out a call, the first LEAs that raised their hand were that coalition of the excited. And then and those really were the LEAs that were helping to devise the baseline of our working group. But we know that there are lots of different LEAs in DC. We benefit from that rich diversity, 72 LEAs. And not all of them have that same level of capacity. And so they were we then did another call to say, okay, you're not ready to sign up for the writing group, sign up as part of the advisory cohort, or sign up just to come to a stakeholder listening session and give us some feedback. What are we missing? You're an atypical LEA serving XYZ student population. What is it that you need in order for these standards to work for you, or to work for you, to work for your students, to work for your school? And so we're confident that the standards, as best as possible, speak to the rich diversity of our DC LEAs. In terms of what that highlighting will actually look like, one of the tools that we are thinking about leveraging and in a deep conversation about at OSCE is related to the resolution that this body passed on the school report card related to thinking about school level badges. We're trying to think strategically about how we think across that tool, the report card tool, and our social emotional learning work, which we know is such a high priority. And so we're thinking about how we could potentially use that. And we're thinking about the work that we have done to date. And as always, the more that we learn, God bless you, about implementation, the more LEAs and schools and best practices will be able to implement.
And so thinking back to the social studies standards and kind of there being like almost like a staggered rollout, like or prioritized rate. How are you all thinking about the rollout for this? Because I do understand that it's not like a single subject area, and I understand that it's also not like a single grade level, but I would imagine that year one of the implementation will shift into year 5, right? And how are you all thinking about the ongoing like professional learning and any curriculum build out that might be needed, or even like older resourcing that can support educators?
These are such great questions. So I will take them in order. First, and actually similar to our social studies work, we are really focused over the next 6 months in developing resources at a pretty rapid clip that then we will own, because we want to make sure that we are taking full advantage of our ESSER funds while they are available, so that and spending date is September 30th. And so now our vendor partner is already underway developing resources that will live on our LMS for this. And in terms of what implementation will look like, we're pulling together cohorts of LEAs serving different grade bands. We haven't made this a specific priority, a certain group or a certain grade band. We want to make sure that from day one, all resources are available. But as we move forward with our FY24, FY25 priorities, we are always listening to our LEAs about how and where they need more resources. And I'm really glad for the earlier questions that gave me a chance to talk more cohesively about our school culture climate portfolio, because we're in a position where we're able to take advantage of this significant chunk of funding that we can use now to develop strong baseline resources across the K to adult education continuum. But then we have those additional school climate funds, excellent relationships with our vendor partners that we can use to develop more targeted resources as we need them over the course of the year.
And then my last question is, I like this. we've been trying to do our best to keep ourselves abreast and update the council in areas where we see overlap. And I know that Councilmember Louis George, still is moving forward with the conflict resolution bill, that she has proposed. Are there places in your, and maybe this is, something you can kind of send us, where there's like overlap, or are there places that, might still, like, need support for further out years?
I love this question. I have really appreciated Councilmember Louis George's advocacy on conflict resolution in particular, and it is a direct result of her advocacy that we have bolstered the conflict resolution component of these standards. I will say that also directly aligns with feedback that we're hearing from the public, including in particularly our students. So that was an area that in this moment in the city, it was particularly important for our team to build out and ensure was robustly included. We're happy to prepare after this meeting, essentially an excerpt that sounds like would be helpful of how those conflict resolution indicators are highlighted in this set of standards. And it is certainly an area that we're excited to work with our LEU states.
That would be, helpful, just kind of like narrowing down where the unmet is. Because I do feel like those are a lot of the right questions, but want to be able to, better understand, where we can see that alignment. Are there other questions or comments?
There's also a slide that does specifically highlight some of those conflict resolution standards. So it may take us a while to gather everything, but that could be a quick resource.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Austin. I appreciate being less than 45 minutes.
Market, thanks for that.
Thank you, Market. Happy to give you all some time, to transition. And then, of course, I want to thank Austin, and the members, for a thoughtful discussion. And we look forward to continue working with you all to finalize. All right, moving us right along. March public meeting and will be brief. For, things go together. The topic for the March panel was, on social emotional learning standards. Members, we do have a summary of key things in your materials. Does anyone have any, comments, any lingering thoughts, or next steps, that they'd like to raise, at the debrief panel?
Not to be redundant of what we just talked about, but I think they're really being optimistic. I think when you look at these school budgets and what was testified to today, a lot of the cuts you're seeing are directly to a lot of these positions that supported the programs that they've talked about. And I think when you look at the cuts that our schools are seeing, particularly in these areas, it's going to be really hard to implement some of the things we're hoping to do here. And I think they talked about they've got the capacity to do it, but I really don't know if our teachers or schools do at the various LEA levels. So I think as we look at these standards and we move forward, we just need to be thinking about that because I don't know. I think it's gonna be a real stretch.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I
Other
think,
thoughts?
I think that's true, but I think my understanding and that what I get from them is their idea is that every classroom teacher, especially in the younger grades, is gonna be doing this.
It's part of their.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the thing that sticks with me from that panel was the quote about, this is not another thing on the plate, SEL is the plate. And so I think that's the spirit. That, I think that's probably true. I think that's also very hard for teachers to make that.
Because eventually when you put too much stuff on the plate, things start falling off the plate. And that's what I worry about with our teachers is we keep doing things, but we're not adding capacity in the school.
I mean, this and many other things that we talk about all.
I think, and I think I'm saying this out loud, is what we're checking for understanding and also to firm out, expectations. I think of SEO as more like an approach. And it's like, it's like the thing, like how it's like children, you know, they had that poem, it's like children learn what they live. And it's like you could teach, unlike a content expertise, right? Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if you're a social studies specific teacher or a math specific teacher. Everyone should be thinking about how to integrate SBL into their practice, which is really messy, which is really hard. But I get why they're saying it's the place. I think that's one of the reasons I asked the question I did around like ongoing professional learning and support. And then like, what does it look like to have like open resources around this? Since it's not necessarily a separate curriculum. And since so much of it is being funded by temporary ESSER funds, it's like it takes a lot of time to change your approach and like integrate into your practice. And I think, or is it not understanding?
I hear you, but I think the challenge is like there are explicit things that we're asking students to learn, you know? And so in doing so, it's hard to, you know, I think it's hard to actually integrate it, to be honest with you, with a lot of them, because there are specific things. Now, I do understand that there are teachable moments, but I think this is beyond a teachable moment. If we're saying like, these are the standards, and these are the things that we want you to fully implement as a teacher. And so doing it with fidelity is going to be really, really difficult to pull off, especially if we're seeing cuts to programs.
I do also think that like a lot of schools have some program already that they're doing that probably aligns pretty well with these, because a lot of what's out there is Castle aligned. So, I mean,
Sorry, last pushback.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I agree that there are a lot of programs, but the question is like, how solid are they? Like, you know, and that's the question that I had before, because I've been in classrooms where I don't believe that it's actually been implemented with fidelity. And so that's the question. Like, so now that we have the standards, it's like, how do we ensure that these standards are properly being implemented while within the classroom? And I think that's what it boils down to. Like, I love the standards. They're actually really, really good. But it's like, how do we ensure that it becomes part of the school day?
yeah,
But, sorry.
is there, I think that's a third thing. So yes, there's the standards, there's the programs, and then there's the implementation. So you're right. It all comes down to whether it makes that last step.
I have one thing, I've been talking about this restorative circle stuff, because it really, really worked. When a couple of our classrooms were doing it at Cardozo, but it was only a couple of classrooms that were doing it. And that's exactly what y'all were talking about.
Yeah.
It worked, and it fit, and I was reading, as he was reading the standards, and I was looking, that's what we were doing every day, just in the circle, talking about stuff, working together and things like that. And it was very helpful, but the implementation of it is what is massive, especially right now where we got the social studies standards and the literacy standards and the social emotional learning standards all being piloted in August. So we got all this stuff happening at one time, even though it doesn't feel like that, but I'm wary.
You're right. Ron Brown, a few years back when they first started, I don't know if they still do it, but at the beginning of the day, they used to have like
Yeah.
and I thought that was done really well. But I hadn't really seen too many other schools utilize or implement a model such as that. And so I guess at the core of my question is like, how do we ensure more schools have systems that are very similar to that? You know,
I agree, and it's also, and I mean, obviously, I was the oldest teacher in the world, but I was willing to do it. But there are a lot of veteran educators who don't really deal well with change, if I might be euphemistic.
I hear all of that. I also, like, when I think about what made Ron Brown work, they have positions dedicated to that through the whole building, right? And so when I say like, it has, because that was also like a cultural piece for them. It wasn't like a sort of justice fit program that we like got off the shelf. What makes SE and to your point, representing a little bit about the social studies rolling out, we'll have financial literacy rolling out. I know that OSSI is tapping specifically into like social studies department heads, and trying to create networks across, to be able to, build out curriculum that is aligned to standards, but also think about like what assessment looks like and support ongoing professional learning. I just don't know what that looks like, for SEL, giving there, I think I have to just, I have a blind spot, I guess, around like who owns it. Cause somebody has to own it. And then somebody both own the owners, like own the support and own the like assessment. And I don't know who is building that falls to, or if they're, or what OSSI is looking to do to like maintain those points of contact with schools as they think about improvements. So, yes. But it's a lot happening, you know.
I mean, my 2 cents would be that from our vantage point and from a bird's eye view, like we can see that OSSI or that a lot of stuff from our point is happening. But schools like are gonna continue doing what they're doing, you know, and I think the way that I view the SEL stuff is similar to what you just said, President Dobson, that it supports the culture that's already there. Like a structure like restorative justice supports the culture that's already there or helps to build culture. Like when you, like at both when I taught middle school and currently teaching high school, like we have 30 minutes every day, you know, Representative Bill Floor can attest to this, right? Where like you're actually talking about, hey, how's your time management? Are your grades up to date? Like you're applying the learning of SEL. Like it's not, I think a program is going to be supportive of school culture, but tackling school culture to support students and being more resilient is like where I think the rubber meets the road. So that just, my 2 cents is like, if we can continue to support school cultures and like help OSSI direct resources to schools to support building capacity in school culture, like that's where I think it will be most effective.
I appreciate that. Representative Shine.
I agree with these tactical and impact-focused considerations. I do also ask the same question that Representative Boulay asked, which is every time we add something, what goes? Because there's not much capacity left, both time-wise, including training time for educators to learn another thing that they need to do, another report that they need to submit, another set of criteria that they need to follow to get through the day. These financial literacy, social studies, I mean, even just during this particular board makeup, in our time, we've had additional guidelines, essentially, provided to our educators with none that I know of, fewer things, other things that we're saying are deprioritized to create room. And I don't know what other body in the district is asking the question of what do we, right, it is a priority question, actually. What do we deprioritize when we name that these are new priorities? Is not a question that I've heard any agency asking. And I think we may need to be the agency that does so.
Or even, or even just like closing the gap, like the, and this is the governance thing, right? Like who gets to put stuff on the plate and who's then responsible for the implementation and the budgeting and all the things, like
there's thought of separately in our structure, so even maybe like, I could make some suggestions around who would ask the question, but I'm not so sure that people ask the questions that the priorities are the same as people who then resource the priorities or implement the priorities.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I agree with you. I think, we were talking about deprioritizing, but I also wonder if it's just like prioritizing, like what do we want to prioritize as like a city around education? Like over time, things change, right? And our educational priorities should probably change with the times too. And so like maybe it is time for us to identify, well, what are the things that we as a community say that we want to, or we need to prioritize in our schools for us to like provide that attention to. Because like, if you think about it over time, there hasn't like really been that much change around like what is taught in schools. And so like, I love the fact that we're talking about financial literacy because honestly, like it's something that our kids need in order to succeed. And so when we start to think about like, well, what are the things that we need, our kids need, like, and even looking at this city alone, like we're going through like crisis with our students and like mental health and violence and youth violence and things of that nature. Like if we're saying those things are also priorities, then we need to also make sure that we're focusing on things like SEL in our class and actually providing explicit time within the school day that is focused on that. Because if we think about like anything else that's important, we have explicit time for it. If we say math is important, we have explicit time for it. We say reading is important, we have explicit time for it. Social studies. And so if we're saying that SEL is also just as important, or, it might not be tested, but if it's just as important, then we also need explicit time for it. And I don't think that it's one of those things that, my only pushback is, when we do say, well, let's just make sure that it's integrated. I think a lot of times when we have things that are integrated, they've already been explicitly taught first and then it's integrated. And so that's my one pushback.
I'm gonna hold my mouth because you haven't.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, everyone.
It's okay.
I'll go real quick. I think we take what you guys brought up first, is very, very relevant point that I think we look at implementation from the standpoint that everything's the size of DCPS or even a larger charter like KIP or Friendship. When you actually have groups that are one-off sites like social justice in Ward 5, they're not going to have the capacity to do all the things that we just named, to implement those things, even if OSSE is helping out somewhat, in the dire strait that they're about to face, because they've had for the last 3 years certain positions that were funded by ESSER, and those positions, I can tell you, are going away. They're going to lose those supportive positions. And so you may have some support, but you're not going to have the type of support to implement this in fidelity, as you said, Representative Best. I'm very, very concerned that this conversation and implementation, again, happens with the thought of everybody's the same size, when that is not the case. And somebody needs to ring the bell to say, look, one size fits all implementation doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to raise is we have this tension between the desire for us citywide, big picture folks to say, we want this outcome, but we also want autonomy for each of our LEAs. But the other thing is like, we did set priorities with the report card. So we kind of stamped like, these are the things that we're measuring, these are the things that are important. And that's why, like, I think it's important, for school climate to be higher up there. School climate's not in the score, it's not in the formula. We're kind of telling schools, your priorities are proficiency, growth, math, ELA, attendance.
I was also holding a thought. I think the other
The thought I had when you were talking, Representative Best, about what does it look like and what do we guarantee? I don't want us to forget, and when I say us, I don't mean us as the board, I mean us as a city, to forget that there's supposed to be work happening around graduate profiles. Because that is supposed to be the thing that says, we hand you a diploma, you are supposed to be able to do this, and this. At like a macro scale, these things are most valuable, I think also in a way that is, articulated, for not just schools, but parents and families and students themselves. And I think that's important too. So that's just my thought about like, what are we guaranteed, that you can and will be able to do? Or, and how have we invested in our school system? Is that's also been missing as a city.
When we were at the NASB conference, the Carnegie Foundation was talking about AI, but it was really talking about the fact that our school systems are based on a model that's over 130 years old. And what I'm hearing from everybody right now is that we need to revolutionize the structure of the school system. It's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that social emotional learning for our children is just as important as algebra or those other things. I'm an English teacher, so I still think that reading and writing. But we really need to talk about what Representative Henderson was talking about. We need to be advocates for a sea change in how education is working in the city. That should be our goal.
I mean, to me, in response to what do the initial steps look like in acting on that? Like, the only thing that I can connect to is that what is directly in our purview is following up on the governance stuff that we've already done. Because if we don't change how decisions get made in the city, right, then nothing, no impact that we have is going to come to fruition. Right? I mean, to me, I'm just trying to be candid in the response. Like, yes, we want things to change, but the path of how to get there, when we're looking at a budget that grossly underfunds so many areas in education, right, is being able to have more accountability, have more oversight, have more clarity and transparency in decision making. And if you don't tackle governance, none of that happens. So, I mean, if that's the thing we want to move forward with, then I'd be happy to figure out how we can gradually do that. But other than that, to me, it's like, where do we go from here?
Oh, ready for me?
I didn't know that was a hand.
I just want, it was, yes, I wasn't just stretching. So I just kind of take the opposite view. I respect your position on this, but I think the governance issue isn't the issue here, specifically not with this. I mean, for me, I've seen both governance models, and I saw a switch over in 2008 to the new governance model of mayoral control. I saw the previous school board before that had mixed results. I mean, we couldn't get schools repaired across the city, and things weren't better at that time. I think we go back and say, well, things were so much better with the old school board, but they really weren't. I mean, there was a modernization crisis. We had buildings falling apart, and our students weren't learning. They couldn't even get books on the first day of school. So for me, like, I don't think there's one magic solution to governance. I certainly don't think that's the fiscal issue the city's facing right now. It's that, we've lost people due to telework. We have federal funds running out, and the fund balance that the council's used the last couple of years to balance the budget can't be used again. So I don't want to blame governance as a body here at SBOE for these challenges. I think that what we're grappling with right now, we have full control over, which is, do we think these standards are putting too much on our teachers at the LEA level, or do we not? And I think that's something we want to be mindful of. And I really like what Representative Chang said, which is that if we're going to try to tell our teachers to do this now, what are we going to say? Let's take off your plate. What are we going to say? Well, we don't need to teach that anymore. That's not as important as this. Because I do feel like our teachers are burning out, and we keep putting more and more on them, without ever taking anything off the plate. I don't think that's a governance issue. I think that's something that we directly control here at SBOE. And we can frankly say no to standards. If we don't like them, we can say we don't think this is a priority and let's not do it. Or we should do it differently. But I don't want to blame governance for it. I don't think that should be our focus here. That's my opinion. And I respect you have a different one. That matter.
Me, I will offer to get this term, but split the baby here and go acknowledging that you've gone way beyond the SEO kind of debrief. One of the things that is within our responsibility as a state board is like house graduation requirements, right? And like what we prioritize. However, we cannot initiate when we take a look at high school graduation requirements because of our governance limitations. And so maybe it is an and both. Like, yes, we do have some responsibility, and there are limitations to us executing our responsibility even within the current structure. So that is my transparent thought. But I don't know if people have other thoughts that either continue down this path or have something specific to that. You know, I'm hearing that it was a good panel and that people are excited about the standards and also have some legitimate and real concerns about what this looks like for our schools and for our kids. I'm seeing wheels still turn, but it sounds like there's nothing burning. Anyone wants to put on the table, which is fair.
I think future facing.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to put on the table is the next time that Aussie comes to us with a new set of standards is for us, I think, an opportunity to raise these questions again and think about both what, in addition to what support mechanisms we provide teachers to implement them, where they're going to be able to actually find the capacity to do that, and then how that ties into what we're actually holding them accountable for. Because in a petri dish, love the standards. As a text, love the standards. Within the context that we are currently in, when it's over 70% of students are chronically absent, they feel very out of touch. And it's unclear to me how we reconcile the de jure, this is what ideally we should be doing, with the reality of the context that we're working in. Because it also looks bad on us as a body if we're like, no, we don't think financial literacy standards make sense. The text is great. I don't know how any teacher will actually be able to practically integrate it into their day-to-day.
I think that's fair. I will put in a plug for the fact that we have done some work with Bossy to talk about what is coming down the pipe. Right? And we need to do more work with Bossy on that, and maybe there just needs to be a push around high school graduation requirements before any. Yeah, I will acknowledge that I do not think we have anything else on the plate around standards following SEL. And I would also acknowledge that a lot of the push has been, there is money available now to get it done. Right? Like if we look at the fuller context, so in certain cases, like, okay, we do this now or never.
Yeah.
I totally respect and appreciate all the things you put on the table around that. And so I would also imagine, and one of the agenda items on our meeting with Aussie is what it looks like as we are facing a transition at Aussie, right? Because we know Dr. Brown is leaving in June. And so all of that is also part of our current reality as we try to look forward as a body. That's all.
Real quick.
I don't see the SEL as disconnected from the absenteeism.
Yes.
So I think there's some.
That's all. All right, we do have now, for a break. To folks need, how many minutes to folks need? We're moving a little faster today, we able to make it, especially by the 6:24. I will remind folks following the break, we have public meetings, upcoming public meetings, committee reports, and then like 2 items in the difference. So. Do folks need 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Is that cool? Make it back in 5 minutes. So let's be back in system.
Ready to alienate himself. He was like, look, I don't like the.
Just said, you know what?
The item will be voted on public meeting panel topics 2 months before each meeting. Last month, we voted on the education budget for the April panel topic, and obviously time for May panel topics. Tonight, we will focus on potential panel topics for our June and July meetings, followed by a vote. Each Monday, I speak fellow, I'll remind that. The first item in that, is the 2024 public meeting panel topic. As we advance, we will discuss and vote on panel topics yesterday, each working session. Those topics have been proposed in the tracker. The floor will be open for suggestions. If more suggestions are given, there is a vote. There can be a vote, not for that. There are no panel suggestions in the tracker for June. Members, let's discuss suggestions.
I mentioned it last month, and I know there was a roundtable on it before, like an AI panel, where like how AI may work together with schools or AI usage in schools. Oh. I was just saying, a panel on like AI usage in schools might be interesting. Even though there was a roundtable already, so I could have done it. Just to get-
I got the premise of you showed up at the end. I heard AI panel for schools would be interesting. Thoughts, responses to that, or other suggestions?
Did we find an alternate date for June? Would that be in Juneteenth? We did, okay.
I'd like to bring up the athletic trainer that I mentioned everybody at our retreat. But having an athletic trainer in all of the, schools to begin with, at all the schools that have football teams. The CPS has athletic trainers, but they don't have an athletic trainer assigned to each particular school. They have their, like, the nurses, some of the athletic trainers have 3 or 4 schools. And I, as a coach and an athlete, that you can't have that happen. It's just like nurses. There should be nurses in every building. And I don't know if that's a dual, I'd rather not be a dual. I'd like to have a panel about the importance of athletic trainers in the sports programs.
Your thoughts? We'll say that each of June meeting is on June 12th. Let you know.
Thank you.
Elizabeth mentioned that their thing was on June the 12th.
That is during the day, I assume. But I don't know the exact time. It tends to be during the day, like the social studies, during the work day. So I'm hoping maybe this is Dr. Bob.
I mean, I think those are both generally good topics. Yeah, I'm curious a little bit more, like with the AI piece, like what would you want to focus on?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. Maybe like either student knowledge of it, like maybe if they should be educated on it in schools, or like student usage in schools, maybe like students who ChatGPT for assignments, like that. Just maybe how they feel AI might affect students and students learning. I also had another idea. I don't know if a panel can be made out of it, but I heard about it from my youth and government program. Having like AED defibrillators, heart defibrillators in schools, because sudden cardiac arrest is, I believe, the #1 killer among high school student athletes. And I don't think there's AEDs. I know there might be AEDs required in each school, but I don't know if there's one on like each floor in each school, and they're hard to kind of get to in an emergency situation, so it's hard to get out. And I believe I heard, I'm not too sure how right this week, but I heard there was a bill before the council about requiring defibrillators either on each floor or in each classroom. But I don't think it like got pushed through like committee level or something like that. So I'm interested in that.
We can marry the two ideas with the athletic trainers and this and kind of like do a student sports panel.
This is just, yeah, a question.
And this is also been graduation time. Did not, or June. So will people be available, are schools out of school, or kids out of school, or people like the trainers, they're not out by June 12th?
Who's already out here?
That week is like, I think the last week, like our 14th, is the last day of school for a lot of schools.
I just remember a lot of us were running to that meeting last year, that June meeting, a few people were impacted for graduation.
For the AI, I would love for it to include, how teachers can use AI. So, yeah. Lighten their load.
It's not a topic, it is still a repeating suggestion that we remove the public panels from the public meeting time and do them online at another time, so that those meetings don't go as long.
Second.
Or maybe not the expert panel, the public testimonies, I know we need to keep, but moving the expert panels to a different time. And I think we could get more people to participate and also make it easier for the panelists if it's online.
Just to let you know, so it was Bill 21-243,
Thank you.
and it never, you're right, it didn't get moved.
Yeah, because I heard about it from a presentation from, I think, Miss DC or the old Miss DC.
Representative Washington, I have no idea
To the
what
mic.
you're saying, but I want
I was gonna say, I think I heard about it from a presentation from an old Miss DC who herself went into sudden cardiac arrest when she was going to school. Yeah, and she told me that she was in DC, she was lobbying for it, but she knows that when it initially got proposed, it never, like, when it passed, they were trying to get it onto, they were trying to email Chair Mickelson so he could get it onto the agenda.
I'm curious, are there other athletic issues that you or student reps like are aware of? That's like an area that's just kind of quiet because of all the other academic stuff.
I mean, that's the most I really heard about it. I've heard a little bit about the trainers, but the aides. I don't know what to ask them.
Let's see what. The meeting topics were less.
But just the meeting topics we had on the summer.
We find it work. It's actually material, my program. We don't have it. So. It was like in July of last year. I see our panelists, I don't know if this tells me the topic, but I see the panelists were Grace Field, Samurai Diamond, Scott Nosey, Sarah Cole, and Armand Quaker. Or June, or for July. That's in the folder, it says 7/19/2023. Public meeting agenda.
Like on the public comment or on the panel?
Try and then. That was the educator development. Development.
I'm also curious, do we need a panel? Or are we just having one out of habit? Or should we avail ourselves to if something happens between now and June? Well, I guess it'll be against the SOPs, so we'll be able to vote on it, but Do you need to fill the space now? Because we don't know what might pop up.
I think, I don't think we ever have to have a panel. I think I think we have to have a certain amount of time that we vote in advance. Which also limits, like, it's really good for planning, both for the people we invite and for our staff and for the public to know when they weigh in, but it does limit us as far as being able to adjust or knowing what is happening. Like, we might not know unless there's certain times of year, it's kind of, what budget is it. As we're working with OSI, we have certain standards in front of us. Yeah, so I think that's why we are kind of forcing the conversation now, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just like, why we're pushing ourselves to think about what would be timely.
Do we have any resolutions that we are trying to get out the door that we need to be informed about? Anybody can think about it? Stuff that we tabled.
I feel like your comments for that.
But do we have any idea when we're gonna start going around extra graduation requirements, or do we not have that?
So I don't think we have a clear and firm timeline around high school graduation requirements. The work has already started. As far as, OSI has had some interviews with folks in that type of thing. But again, and this goes back to what I stated earlier, is we have done our best to do the work with OSI to chart out as far as, and I really, looking at the people who are networking group. And we are going back to talk about transition, and then Superintendent Grant is giving in June. We do not know what day in June, we just know it'll be June. And so there's a good deal of uncertainty beginning in the month of June.
What about truancy? We have the truancy and absence. Chronic absence, resolution that we haven't, gotten back to. But we had a panel on that,
Yes, that's what a resolution came from.
because it seems to me that we need to hear from government, especially from DCPS, about what they're doing as far as the chronic absence. I don't know what that is. What we really need to hear what they're doing about that, because it's evident in the whole system. I don't know how do we do that? We ask the DCPS to come and talk to us at a business meeting? Or it's hard to get principals and school people, especially in DCPS, to come and testify. Because they're really told not to do it.
They were called to testify in front of the council.
Well, they have to testify. in front of the
Right,
council.
and that was fairly recently when the report came out. I don't know what it would look like to get different information from them now. Or if they would come, they can't mandate them to come testify before us. We don't have that type of oversight. If that is helpful to folks, I mean, we could reach out, but I would imagine they wouldn't give us much more detail than what they gave to the council. Which is why we try to invite folks to talk about like what they're doing, either with DCPS or other LEAs, and like what they would recommend. I know we recently run into some problems when we've invited DCPS to testify on things that I would consider less controversial. So I do just want to acknowledge that as we've done some panel invitations, I have to follow up about their inviting and who we requested.
Yeah, I know. What about, since OSI is the vehicle for the last report call, And those figures, the attendance figures on the last report card started. We asked Ossie to come to a business meeting and talk about how they got those figures. I'm trying.
We could, like, you mean to, well, not a payment, you're saying like when Austin comes before.
On board, the answers from Ossie was, well, we're not in charge of that. We have nothing to do with that. All we do is write them down. Somebody has to change it. We're talking about changing things. And this is something that needs to be changed or blown up and started over again or something.
Can I offer a separate, possibly delayed thought as I'm processing, both of our conversations around SPL, and SPL priorities. The question around when is Austin picking up the graduation work. Maybe since it is actually graduation season, maybe it actually might be of interest to do a panel on like some of the stuff around like profile of the graduate and also revisit some of the stuff around special education students. Because currently we don't actually have a pathway for a lot of our students to graduate with a diploma. As we are thinking about, okay, we know that is coming, like what should we be thinking about is we are gonna have to probably help frame that conversation with our since they're going through some transition. Would that be helpful for you? Is that, or? I'm trying to think about what's happening at that point in time and also what we're gonna need to be prepared to do work around and also just to say there's gonna be a document given Superintendent Grant is transitioning, like how best to support us as the board in thinking about what we want to push forward and move forward.
Is there I don't understand transition when Dr. Grant leaves. Is there going to be an interim? Are they searching now? What's going on with that? She mentioned that again. She met with you.
We haven't met with her yet. We meet with her next week. But we don't know anything more than anyone else. The job is posted. Or do you know that?
So I'm anticipating that our committee will be working on that graduate. So I'm not sure if that would be like too soon for us to have a meeting. Maybe we need some lead up time to make the most of that panel. Maybe. Speaking for myself.
Yeah, that's a question. I mean, I think I was thinking more like, just something to start up. Not as like a final.
Well, that's also a few months.
Yeah. Like how do we start the work to think, like, to preempt us? You kind of give us a sense of what the universe is. Since I just don't know how much guidance we're gonna get or like, and I also want us to be prepared to take advantage of any opportunities we can as a body, to help. I'm gonna continue to work prioritize, or drive that conversation. But I'm also not tied to anything that we haven't voted on anything, so.
I like your idea, so I endorse it wholeheartedly.
I know this is, still new to doing this, and so, I appreciate folks like being in that and making suggestions on what our.
But technically, it's still just like you more than 2 months away from the community. So you don't have to vote on that if you don't want to do that, because we already won't pay. So yeah, we're in, this is April, so like in May.
Yes, I was gonna acknowledge that July is definitely way too far, to think about some struggles, to think about June. And so I'm happy to just, like, we can record those in the tracker as possibilities. And revisit next month if there's nothing that people go web to at this point. Or if there's something that someone feels strongly about in closing for June now.
Representative Washington will be leaving, right? So if you want to do AI before you leave, you do it.
I think my question to Representative Washington would be, well, I guess you get one, you get AI or you get, something around sports and health, but, and maybe you don't have to decide that tonight, but, I think my offer is to report all of the things in the tracker to think about it a little bit, but I do think that is a perfect flag. If there's something that any of our students in particular feel strongly about.
I personally would probably prioritize the student health one, because we did the AI roundtable already. And we probably have not that much time, but we have like more time to talk about AI. It's growing because states of the world. So I guess the student health one, I should want to.
So, do you want to work with Representative O'Leary to like flesh that out a little bit?
I was thinking about, and y'all were talking about that. I just, had a couple of people come talk at the public groups about that whole training thing.
Well, it sounds like, and please speak for yourself, but it sounded like something larger around student health that fits a couple of different tenets and aspects. So student health is what, Representative Washington was proposing.
Maybe something that's like, that kind of fits into like specifically student advocates of like the hard issue, but also student trainers, the importance of having like an adult there as well.
We can work together.
Okay, and then we can, be prepared to take a vote at our next working session. All right,
Some of the conditions of that.
and we can record some of the other activity tracker from live, so people have this conversation again. All right, next on the agenda, we have committee reports. I don't believe, committees have met yet. I would be surprised if they had. But I don't know if, any of the chairs, have things to share. I do know that admin, has an update, which also includes the budget diagram. And, I know that, the student advisory committee is saying things to be on that next week. So I don't want to preclude you all from making updates, but we'll start, with admin and then any of the, ad hocs. Subsequently, we'll go to those next. We do alphabetical order. So Vice President Adams.
Thank you, Madam President. The admin committee did meet, March 22nd, from 3 to 4 p.m. In attendance in the newly constituted, group committee, myself, Debbie Rose Thompson, Alistair, Goulet, Butler, and Davis were in attendance. Ms. Tony Crichton was not available that day. Some of the highlights that we had, the meeting focused on outlining the next steps of the budget oversight. We decided on the following outline for testimony. Open focusing on agency independence and a request to reject the mayor's supplemental budget. We also highlighted the State Board of Education's performance, budget ask and reinforcement of SPED Hub and Human Resource FTE. and looking ahead to 2025. We also discussed the mayor's FY 24 supplemental budget as stated. There was a request for a $187,000 cut in personnel funding, which we discussed. And we talked about that before, because it's not. We're about to get into that more. Okay, so you'll get more details on that. For the chief student advocate, we shared OSA updates as outlined below. It says that the April 6th KIP DC family reunion in Oxeron Park, I can tell you categorically that it has been moved to their high school that is in Ward 8, Legacy Prep, but they are still looking to have that event. DCPS has a math fair at Houston Elementary School on April 15th, OSA and DHS Student Leader Summit at MLK Library from 10 to 5. On April 24th, we have a SPED workshop at Dorothy Heights Library from 6 to 8 p.m. And then May 9th and 16th, we're holding a day for Ward 7 Student Safety Solution working groups. And also, State Board shared the status of the hiring for vacant positions, which we talked about earlier as well. So the procurement analyst starts April 8th. The admin and ops fellow starts April 8th. And we're already underway for the search of the public information officer. Phone screenings will happen the week of the first week of February, which is now. Video conference interviews will be the week of the 9th to the 12th. And final interviews and skills assessment will be the week of the 14th to the 19th. That includes the admin section.
Do members have questions, or any of the other committee members have things to add before we get into the deep dive and like the budget details?
There is one edit, there's a typo. There should be a 182,000 instead of 87.
Okay. Thank you.
Realize that.
Thank you for that correction. It works.
Before we dive into the budget, so we get into, we'll both be getting into the FY 25 budget and the supplemental. I do want to thank the staff for helping us move as quickly as we can to get the hiring done. Because so folks know, the supplemental cut is proposed based on any vacancies we have. And so if we are gonna have a public information officer, we have to move really quickly. And so I really appreciate the push and the hopefully completion to just move this position along really, really fast. We already have the funding search for this, and so we were able, sounds like we were able to avoid that being factored into our cuts, and that work really matters for us as an agency. So thank you for moving them on board in those positions. Are there any questions or? Yeah.
Was there a response to the letter that we sent?
The response I got from the chairman was, if you can get your positions filled, that would really help. Because we will not cut positions when people get them. I do think the council is doing their best to be responsible and find efficiencies while understanding we are a small agency, and 180,000 for us is a large percentage of our budget. And so we are trying to work with their guidance to not put them in a position where they are cutting as help with us.
How many applications? Yeah.
We ended up with, well, actually, the first year, so I'm saying about 20, there's a big option. Move on to the first year.
So where's the number now?
Well, there were 15 people invited to sign up for phone interviews, only 12 have, we've already treated 7 of those. So the rest will happen tomorrow, Friday, and then we'll be on for next Thursday and Friday to do.
What's the next level cut?
It's the number 2.
Oh, we're gonna go from 12 to 6 to 3.
questions.
So is it best if, Worker Butler, do you want to walk us through?
Yeah. So in your document, it's at a glance. There are even more things in each of their budget, but this is just the ed cluster. And so we went through for OXI, for the deputy mayor, PC Public Libraries, Department of Recreation, PC Public Schools, about what's included in the FY25 budget. There are areas that were reduced, so you will see the pay equity fund, which a lot of folks are talking about all over the media, the council, that is clearly in that first bucket, 77 million. And then a decrease in the second line item of 24 million, which includes the community schools program and programmatic service level reduction for the quality improvement network. So I know many of the schools in wards across the district, community schools have been a very valuable and supportive initiative. There were some increases. There was an increase they switched the funding for the healthy school funds. It wasn't dedicated tax. Now they moved that to local funds. And they did have $500,000 to support educator wellness technical assistance grants. I think that was something represented by 10%. That was important that you mentioned before. They did do a one-time increase of 6.8 million with 3 FTEs for the high impact tutoring. An increase for the reimagining high schools, that's 5 million, but 11 FTE. And then some other $500,000 or so increases for statewide standardization of assessments, adult education training grant, teacher apprenticeship. And one of the key things, there was a move from the DME. So the grant for adult education and training was transferred from the DME's office to us. Which would be where the funding was. In the deputy mayor, there's an increase of 6.8 million for after school and support of the out of school time grants and half an FTE for the Board A technical center, and about $500,000 for that. So that request in terms of out of school time allows us something that we put in our budget letter. Request, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how much of that is restoring one-time money that went away versus how much is above the level from the appropriation in FY24? Because still, if it's one time, it disappears and then they add it back. But how much are we above what we were last year? Do you have any idea? And I'm not putting you in the spot if you don't know. It's no big deal.
I don't know that number. This was pulled directly from the mayor's budget and the narrative that they said. There is a different email that has gone out from the DMV's office that highlights, share that around. These are all the things that are being maintained and these are all the additions. But what's not included that is anything that they cut. It's only the maintained and the addition, but we can share that email around all the time.
I'll try to find out too, because they'll reflect it as a reduction in the current services funding level budget, because it was one-time funded last year. And then it'll appear back as their policy initiative, but that isn't necessarily funding above last year's level. So I can work with you to figure that number out, because it's one thing I've been trying to figure out today.
Somebody asked a question about it today. I can't remember who, but they asked about whether it would be continuing and they said they expected that it would be.
But maybe it's one-time money again. That sounds like a very soft way of.
But I did take it as.
But it literally said, oh, that's the high factor. I'm sorry. It says one-time increase to 6.8.
I think it's a one-time on top of something. I don't know what the other.
And so that's the DMV. So they did increase because there's new office of the Office of Education for Employment Pathways. You all saw that new office within the DMV. So they're gonna add 3 FTEs there. And the tenant intervention program has been increased by 375. And then next, just these, the public libraries are seeing increases, particularly for more programming, for police and then for mental health services across the library division for folks that take advantage of. DPR, the only main thing that's also only increased there, they're gonna increase funding for mobile recreation and late night operating hours for DPR, for families and communities, and an increase of 2 FTEs to support the operating impacts for the Anacostia Recreation Center at Ketchum, which is set to open in FY 25. So it's not yet open, but it will be open. They're staffing that rec center. And then, so in DCPS, what you don't have here is school level budgets. These are essentially the central office impacts of the budget today. So,
And Bernice,
yes,
I figured you might not, so I sent everybody the school by school budget, so you all have now in your email the submitted budgets for every school in the city. Except one that is duplicated in the mayor's budget, they have their own budget up there, so School Without Walls Stevens has the other School Without Walls in its place, so we don't have that one yet, but you all have all the school budgets in your inboxes.
and you will see that they are funding 144 positions in federal funds through an MOU for Medicaid services for eligible students. So they are finding ways to keep some of the people they have through funding, federal funding, and take them off the local funds, which is, I think, something they haven't done in the past with this particular pot of money. There was an increase in the per pupil spending levels. The early stages program got an increase, and then there was 7.2 million for impact bonuses, offset by a decrease to the stabilization funding. And then I think there was some money reduction in revenues for the after school co-payment, like fees connected to that program. So these are the overarching things that were all included in the mayor's budget. This does not include any cuts that council is thinking about or changes. And it's not capital. Yeah, no, these are not capital. These are all operating costs. The capital budget is larger and different. But there is some things like, for example, that you will know that when it's Claire sent out. There is 2.2 billion. The new investments for FY 25 to support the full modernization of 33 schools across the district. And so we can get a list of what those schools are. But that is currently a new investment for FY 25 that was in the budget in previous years.
Just FYI, Whittier, is going to have the, buildings right next door to the schools. Brought that up with Chancellor last night. So they got that. That whole neighborhood is very happy. They won't have to go 3.5 miles. Short course.
Bernice, I just want to also put out there that, you know, we sent that letter about adding money to the UPSFF. And I think we've got, you know, an additional over 7.5 million that got directly added to the budgets of schools out of that February revenue. So I think that's a big win for us. You know, that was our number one thing we advocated for. And presumably that's also been getting matched to charters. So it's really about 15 million. So roughly a quarter of the money that was certified in February is going right directly to our schools. So I think that that's a big win for us that we advocated for that. And then it's right here in the school budget. So I think that's really a success.
And another one is like we talked about the pipeline for healthcare and students because about the need for having a nurse in every school. And to sort of the one way the district could do that was around expanding the technical career partnerships that they have in school. And there's actually 17 million to expand advanced technical education and center to include a healthcare employer partnership providing career and technical education for district students and healthcare services to residents. And so that was one of the things we wanted to push for more nurses. And one way to increase the number of nurses is to provide training for them to create a pipeline. So that was one thing we included in our budget letter also. And thank you, Rochelle, for doing that work.
Other initial reactions to this?
Are we doing our budget separate?
Let us get into that next.
All right.
I just asked, I know many members, at the beginning of the session, have been watching and have been, following. So we tried to start to pull together some of what the picture is. We at least had a sense of what from our budget letter, where things show up, like starting to census is not kind of the end of it, because there's more delving into the budget to do. And so I do appreciate staff kind of pulling a snapshot of what they could so quickly. Because, and we will get into our budget next. I'm not gonna belabor the discussion about the other parts, but I'm sure like Representative Chang has questions about his literacy recommendations and other things that are not in there. But we have some more digging to do. Can we transition to our budget, because we do have to do tomorrow? I think so. Friday, oh Lord, okay. I was like, because it's, I mean, well, it's just a little, well, listen, this whole budget timeline is brutal. Thank you for everybody who did work writing a testimony for the budget without seeing the budget, right? And we are now trying to make adjustments. So we are prepared for our testimony this Friday, because we have been in contact with Chairman's office and do have a sense of like some of the questions that will ask us. We do need to be able to talk about the supplemental requests and proposed cuts, and then we need to be able to talk about our needs as an agency. Overall, with the FY 25 budget, it looks like we fared pretty well so far, because it's been positions have been transitioned for local funds as proposed by the mayor, which is really important. Because I don't know how we're gonna go fight for 6 positions. So that is a relief. And we do not yet have the HR position funded, and the other requests were not funded. And so that's a quick and dirty overview of that. I do want Bernice to be able to explain the supplemental cuts and where that money came from, and the 182, not 187. So they were finding us $5,000 for a typo. But I'm gonna come back to you because you have been in contact with the budget office today to explain where they found or where this proposed 182,000 cuts from office.
Yeah, so, our AF office emailed us, because it's not technically like on our website anywhere, supplemental budget. But he emailed us the final, what went into the CFO for the supplemental. In the supplemental budget, our mid-year budget increases or decreases to the current fiscal year. So to our current operating operating budget for the agency. And they're based on what member mayor proposes to the council, and the council still, they usually vote on it at the same time, which they vote on the FY 20, the next year's fiscal year budget. So they will be adjusting this, and council looking at what is proposed, and they're deciding to know we're not gonna decrease that or accept it and adjust it some other kind of way. And so they have proposed that $1,082 come from the state board in 2 main areas. So one is the office of, like our core office, in the amount of $73,000. And then the associated branch that goes with that. And then another $73,000 from the ombudsman's office. And so I called today and I asked like questions, so what does this mean? Where does this come from? So from the state board office. So because we were unable, with our issues with DCHR, another thing, to get the procurement analyst position filled sooner. When the budget was created at the beginning of the year, it was budgeted for clearly 12 months. The analyst will start Monday, and so that means the first 6 months of the year, that salary was not used. So all of those savings, they're still in the budget, so they want to take those away. They're not taking it away from next year, but from the current fiscal year. And then the associated fringe benefits that go with that salary. The other piece of those savings from the state board office will come from Malayo's vacancy. So Malayo left in January, it's now April. So essentially a whole quarter of salary that was not used. And the associated fringe benefits, and that's how they get the 73 for the state board. I am less clear, to be honest, about the 70,000 for the ombudsman's office. Because they had, their vacancies were not as clear as ours. Right. And so it's caught up in a number of things where they had someone in the position, but due to the transition of ombudsman, there was like pay increases that were planned for, were not processed. And so they're just funds that aren't necessarily as easily traceable. And so we need those to be clear to make sure they're not infringing on some of the things that we had planned for as we are in the transition of hiring the new ombudsman. And so I think it particularly be my recommendation, if there's going to be, and we should put into the testimony, direct language to reject that. Because what we don't want to do as the new ombudsman is starting in April is to really hand her a handicap coming in with short budget, when there are things that now since we have a permanent director. Ombudsman that we can execute on and to like make the staff and stay separate because of that. That's all.
I have a question. My question, I know we have, the contract support right now, with Core Communications. Did that come from a separate line item?
Well, a contract is non-operating expenses.
Right.
Non-personnel, so this comes from operating budget, so we just have a contract with an employment agency. So it's just not related to our personnel spending at all. So that's coming out of our operating, our non-personnel budget.
But I'm assuming, no worries, we're probably on the same place. I'm assuming we're able to absorb that because of some of the contractual work we didn't do. Because of committees, like, remember, we had certain line items for committees and work that.
That is definitely true, so there are things that committees didn't do, which gave us room in our contract budget to do a couple of things. We hired someone to help us with the annual report design, because Malaya left, that was one of her duties. And then we hired a contract communication support just for the office to help us execute some of those functions. And both of those are PO and not necessarily personnel, not for operating dollars.
That's helpful. I was just trying to assess our runway in contractual support and we're getting the person what that meant for others. I know Representative Boulay is going to jump in.
Yeah, so
is that your question or something?
It was great.
So a suggestion of how to do this. Can we take, for those two vacancies, can we take like each 2-week pay period and estimate roughly the amount of salary and fringe that we would have there? Add that up, because what I'm a little concerned by when I hear about the communications position is we're trying to actively fill that position now. And I worry this could delay the hiring of it or create a spending pressure for us as an agency, because I don't think you're gonna get that level of savings with the time that position's been vacant. So I think that could do a couple of things that are bad for us. One, it could delay hiring or create the spending pressure. And the worst case scenario would be that it delays hiring, and then since the position's vacant, it gets swept. As council's trying to find money for whatever they're trying to find it for. So I think going in, with the testimony is just expressing concern that the vacancy savings may be higher than is attainable, based on the hiring schedule we have for those FTEs, and that we want to work closely with the council's budget office to ensure that that number doesn't create a spending pressure for the agency or something like that. Because I think that's a pretty tough number to hit, given the parameters that they've given us, and given the hiring schedule you're on, the communications director. I don't know if it makes sense or not.
It does make sense.
Okay.
We'll include that.
Other thoughts, questions? We're throwing a lot of numbers at you.
Is this on the overall budget or just on the FY24?
It's supplemental.
Yeah, this is supplemental.
But we have to supplement the overall budget. We're trying to chunk it for folks. Anything else with the supplemental? One last thing I would acknowledge, just because we did get a question about it from the ombudsman's office. In the resolution, it says April 8th, that we would transition. And we did that because we were trying to preempt this but we are not bringing on the new ombudsman until April 22nd. It's her start date, Tony Pryor will continue to serve in the ombudsman role until that transition happens. But just in case we were gonna have to, move the start date up, that's why my solution did say April 8th. We were, doing our best to protect, our people. So I do want to acknowledge that. Are we ready to go into FY 25?
So FY 25 overall, is very positive. What you will see essentially percentage change from FY 24 to 22.6% increase in the budget. And that is due to the addition of the SBED Hub staff, and operating costs. So that they set aside money for personnel and money for operating, and what the mayor gave us, in the enhancement. So that is included. So it will move our agency FTE 33 to 38. And then they also included 600,000 in the capital budget request for us to update the current state board offices. And so DGS came down, they walked through with us. There were a number of meetings, talk about, there are some standards in terms of, it's almost like if a building is historic, if you're not trying to update it, they're not gonna make you put in ramps. Once you decide to update the building, you have to be ADA compliant. And so the same thing with our offices, like if we were not updating, they would change it, but because we have decided to ask for money to update our requirements. So there are certain people that have to have locked offices. There are certain people that have to be in certain types of spaces. The literally configuration measurements of office spaces have changed. So all that is included in the 600 with furniture. It would include the design, the architectural development, and other different things in our space. So we are happy about that, glad that it was included in the capital budget. But that is essentially the only change in our business, inclusion of the SPED Hub and then the 600 in capital.
And just a note about the SPED Hub drove down, the SPED Hub position, we rolled SPED Hub in.
And there were two MOUs.
There were actually two. We labeled everything as SPED, we labeled everything. We could possibly fit under special education, including assistant special education positions that we were at risk of losing. So we have all of those. It's not just 4 positions that that's why 6 instead of 5. Okay. Oh, I'm trying to get your fix. I'm the HR person.
Yeah. And so
I'm finding it now.
Yeah, go back. And so essentially that is the thing, because I think it is prudent that if you add 5 FTEs, that, and now we're like literally very close to 40, and there's no internal personnel, HR personnel. Where agency like OSSI, while they work with the DC department, they have their own entire hiring team. They put stuff in PeopleSoft and everything. And it's the same PeopleSoft system that we use, unlike DCPS, which has a entirely separate system. OSSI uses the same system, but they also just have internal HR for their agency. And it would help if we had one. To really, it would speed up like some of the issues that we ran into with our procurement analysts. Our position description was approved in October and ready to be posted, but we couldn't get a position number to be put into PeopleSoft, and that's not something we can do or have access to on our end. And we have to go to CHR. If we had an internal person who was trained and had access to the system, they could have done that, send it to the person to get it posted, and we could have been up and running in October and not be at risk of losing some of this money that was set aside for this position.
Do we pay for those services?
We do. We have an MOU with DCHR for enhanced services. That is not the services are quick or efficient.
Or enhanced.
Yes. Yes.
So, and we did. But they're going through their, and I will say, we know for a fact DCHR is going through like their own staffing challenges, which is, it's not our fault. They still signed the MOU, said that they would provide the services, so. But they are also going through their own staffing challenges and turnover, which has impacted us as an agency. Yes.
The 39,813 that they made us absorb in the personal services salary and fringe amounts. It looks like it's coming out of supplies, equipment, and other services. Do you know what specifically that's reducing within the agency, the 39,13?
Yeah, so when we did that, we actually knew about that going in. That's actually coming just from our supply and our contractual services. So money that would be available for board projects or research or those kind of things. We took it out because that's the largest pot of money that we have. Everything else is like dedicated to a specific, so we didn't want to take it out of supplies or phones or computers. But we took it out of the largest bucket, because with one, the increases. I don't know how, like with the increase in member salaries, what we did also realize is there was an increase in member fringe. And so, but the mayor didn't budget for fringe, she only budget, and so we had to absorb those costs.
Does that impact the member stipends at all or not?
It does not.
Okay.
I'm also assuming we have to scale the budget for everybody's benefits, but not everybody's benefits, that helps us in somewhere.
A little bit, yeah, and that's why when they put in the request to get money back, they also include a separate line to take the fringe back too. Okay. So they didn't just take it all out of one place, they took it out of the fringe and salary, so I thought so.
And I may have misspoke on that. I didn't mean like the member personnel stipends. I was speaking about the ward NPS amounts. I don't know if that's-
No, so those are still $1,000
Okay.
that you all have access to.
Those aren't,
No, we did not cut it from there, we cut it from like the committee work budget.
okay, good.
Friendly reminder to spend that, you're not spending.
$1,000 per member. Community engagement. Good plug for spending that.
Other thoughts or questions? Or strategies?
That's all that I have for you. That is the budget. I've been in it all day, so. And it's funny, I showed this to Andy. It's like, yeah, this actually represents what I've done. Hope so. It came right out what the mayor is like.
Well, thank you. Well, we will, thank you for your recommendation back on the testimony already. Thank you, for the work, to update us, given we didn't have any of it, we wrote the testimony. And thank you, for leaning in members, with suggestions. Not just how we can update the testimony, but how we can, defend our agency. I would say I still feel pretty optimistic because, we just don't have as big of a hill to climb as we did. So, we just have to do a couple more things and, that's all. So all of that is the admin committee report. Thank you, admin committee, and everyone. College career and life readiness, excuse me, Representative Henderson.
Yeah, nothing at this moment.
No worries, I'm hard follow up. You welcome that. Educator excellence, Representative O'Leary has departed. I don't know if anyone has anything to raise instead.
Nothing to report.
All right, student experience and engagement, Representative Williams.
We're just looking to schedule our first meeting.
Sounds like a plan. Student advisory committee. Who am I coming to? Representative. Okay.
Yeah, so last week, last student advisory committee, we received presentations from OSCE on financial literacy standards and a presentation from the Office of the Student Advocate. We also reviewed the results from a student advisory committee-wide survey targeting priority items for students and discussed opportunities for action forward. The main priorities were teacher retention, student safety, and mental health. And our next meeting is this upcoming April 8th, where we will hear from the DC Policy Center about their state of DC schools report, and we'll work more on our action items we'll work more on our action items and hear resolution SR 24-11, supporting the District of Columbia social and emotional learning standards.
External committee reports. Yes.
The Education and Research Collaborative met March 21st, I think. The main thing to report out is, Josh Boots shared the, math report that, Power K-12 did, it's funded by Ed Forward, and the collaborative was a partner, of some sort. So I would, recommend that you all look at the report if you haven't yet.
And our program,
I do not mind saying.
there's an event coming up.
Yeah, Friday.
Right, okay.
Math Summit. It's on both those things.
Any other questions? I didn't have questions or other questions.
I don't have a question, just another external.
For the external committee.
Well, with regards to the Everyday Counts Task Force, there is, Jen and Darren, I think, sent around materials based on the last, meeting, and then there's another in-person meeting that I'll attend in the latter part of April, where we're trying to move forward on how to have effective, cross-agency collaboration. So we're essentially like still working on how to develop a citywide framework. Nothing has been decided yet, but that's the next meeting that will take place in person, and then there'll be one final meeting in May before recommendations are presented in June.
Question? All right, any other external committee reports? I would like to folks that, I'm the Kathleen, that's fine. And I will also like for folks that the safety recommendations maybe are out. Dan sits on that external committee for us. They should already be your email. I'm just gonna go ahead and like the advocacy study too. Technically, that's not any sort of committee report, but, Dan is also just, Dan probably does not listen to these meetings, but kudos to Dan, for his engagement in that, and then just like his updates along the way. Really appreciate those, looking forward to seeing, those recommendations.
President Thompson and I are on the Environmental Literacy Advisory Committee that we met last week. President Thompson will attend, but we did talk about, the community of schools resolution, because it actually fulfilled the state board's one action item for the current environmental literacy plan, which is that we would consider climate education and environmental literacy whenever we review standards. So we shared that update, and then OSCE was able to let us know the status of the environmental literacy plan for the next 3 years. So it's been approved by OSCE's internal leadership, and they had, when we talked last week, they had sent it to the DME to approve, and then at that point it goes to mayor and council, who will, become public at that point.
Question. All right, I have a flag. I know last month we passed a resolution around, state board, internal, committee assignments. We also need to make, external committee assignments. So we will have to send something around. That does not mean you can't keep your committee assignments, if you like, you don't need board shakeups, but where there are places where we have vacancy, or, need to make adjustments, it's stopped.
So we can send that around to you all on Friday in the follow-up for tonight's working session. Survey to look at external.
I think that's it for the external committee. I think we're making good time. We're almost there, guys. Now on to the business. I want to ask members if there are additional items for new business to add to the following list. FR 24-11, supporting the DC social and emotional learning standards. Youth budget engagement forum. Other items or new business? Yes,
An update on the voter registration.
okay. I'll do. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna say Chauncey. Other things?
Yes, the resolution. One,
Yes.
one is the, dual enrollment. Talk about a resolution about that. And the other one would be, quality education as a civil rights. Resolution.
Anything else? Yes, no?
The voter registration.
That's on here.
Yeah, let me do that.
That's how we know it's getting later in the evening. I'll read back out so we know what's on the list. SR 24 11 supporting social emotional learning standards. Youth budget forum, high school voter, registration update, truancy update, dual enrollment, and quality education as a civil right. Anything else? Yes,
How are we defining quality education then? I guess I gotta read the
I
rest.
think that's gonna be part of the discussion.
That will be fun.
Okay,
Okay. So if those are okay for the categories, we will proceed with that list. SR 24 11 supporting DC social emotional learning standards. I think this one, members, we have all the documents. Does anyone have, feedback or questions? And I know that, there's been some email traffic about the responses to our letter. Aside from, I feel like we kind of discussed this in 3 parts, but, last call, for feedback in this meeting.
Yeah, I think I need a minute to,
Read,
yeah.
okay. Happy to give folks a minute to read. Then kind of give me an indication you all already. That folks are already up there. Still reading or no thoughts?
So I'm fine with the resolution, but I would like to look at what changes have been made. So we just got the letter, the responses today. So I think we should look at that over the next couple days.
That makes sense.
So I said last call after this. It would be helpful that you do have the changes feedback based on the letter that Austin sent, that you get that back to capital. Right, that's right there, or outside.
would have to send it back to Ossie. And if you could send it back to us by next Tuesday, April 9th.
I was looking for Kathleen, because I kind of scanned through their feedback quickly and they were caught up on indicators and standards and I can follow up with her later to see it. What that point was about.
Happy to move on to the budget forum. Our purpose of discussing this came out of a discussion that the admin committee had, when we were, having our own, struggles with knowing what was going on with the budget and thinking about the fact that we had to prepare a testimony without seeing the budget. And knowing that other people, will also be, in similar situations that are testifying in the public. So Representative Boulay actually suggested, that we take the initiative, and I think we're actually, proposing to expand beyond, to hold a separate time for folks to testify, as almost like a roundtable. And so members of the public, come in, share their budget concerns with us, so we can also package those and roll them up to council, since there are, I don't even know how many witnesses. At this point, you get 3 minutes and that's it, so we can at least give an additional 3 minutes, for folks and another opportunity. Since it is a one-off, like you make it that day or you don't. And so I'll, the rest of the admin committee, to highlight anything else, but I do want to center that discussion came out of the admin committee and kind of give some context of why it's out of respect.
I mean, I just felt very strongly about this. I think this year's council budget process is the most offensive process that I've ever seen in history of the budget. I mean, they have one hearing where they're putting OSSI, ECPS, and DME. Now, they did that last year too, and there was close to 400 people. We're up to about 475, I think, roughly, last I checked the witness list. So
That's crazy.
it's an outrageous number of people. They're also condensing the testimony down. You got 3 agencies, and you only get 3 minutes total to speak about OSSI, ECPS, and DME, which is just, you can't possibly say all the things that need to be said about those agencies if you're paying attention in 3 minutes. Also, I don't like that it's being done just 2 days after the budget. I mean, we got the budget, the school budgets came out around 9 o'clock AM this morning, so that's only 24 hours basically until the hearing starts, that LSATs have to absorb this budget and then come in and speak about it, which is not nearly enough time. And then lastly, it's on a weekday. So there used to be weekend hearings. I mean, Vince Gray would do separate youth hearings, which is kind of one thing I was wrestling with. Do we want to just do a youth hearing? Or do we want to open it up to everybody? I'd love to get feedback on that. I'd be even willing to do 2 days, one youth hearing. I don't want to put too much on the staff, but one youth hearing and then one hearing with everybody. But I think it's just an opportunity for people to come in and have a say who might not have been able to get their thoughts together in 24 hours. A chance for people who may be working during the day and can't testify, who may want to come in on a weekend. And really, particularly an opportunity to hear from our youth who really can't come into our regular SBOE meetings, but might really take advantage of an opportunity to come and speak about what the budget means to their school, and hear from us. And I think it would be just a great ability to learn, listen, and then be able to relay what we've heard to council members as they consider the budget. So I think it's we're really transparent here, and I really think that's something the public appreciates, and I'd like to be able to continue that.
Can I add a couple of details to that? So, one, we, in order to encourage youth participation, but not like exclude, because I think, like for me, everybody's in the same situation. Like, I feel like the adults too are feeling crunched and unheard. But we want to offer community service hours to testify. So you can do that. And when you do justice, so you can offer community service for things like this. Two, one of the reasons we talked about it as a roundtable was to allow members to come and go in case, because we don't know the exact timing of like the end, because it really depends on people showing up. But that way it can continue in case members get to trickle in and out in the event we don't have a form or anything. So of course, we need, a couple members that are like consistently, but, just know we don't know, like, the timing, and I know that everybody that's like, that's why we're suggesting it as a round table instead of like a special meeting of the work we got to maintain on the whole time. Or, some of the other items we have, so.
When are we thinking for this?
So there's a one page that the staff put together, it's on this. And I will say when the staff met, based on the new bylaw, this would also be difficult to do at the round table. Yeah, I thought it was fun. Yeah, I said, staff said our recommendation at our discussion of the bylaw, they looked at the SOPs and everything. We suggested it be called the budget form. It would be crafted as a community engagement event and not a, because there's specific rules around round tables and SOPs about how they have to plan 60 days. Again, all this stuff is about 60 days. Was it 30 days? But it's some kind of days that's not within the time frame which we're working here, which is why we pivoted to the format that's in the one pager. But based on our best thinking, this is what we were able to come up with, to summarize the request from the admin committee and to align with what we thought was our best thinking.
I completely agree with your format. Can you, when we put this notice out, can we also notice in the DC Register though, just so we meet open meetings requirements?
Yeah,
too?
yeah,
Because if we have
everything
a
will be
quorum-
noticed appropriately.
Okay, good. So, and then we wouldn't have to worry about quorum though, to the converse. Like if we lost quorum, we'd be fine because no quorum is required. As long as you got a member sitting up there, you'll be good to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a community engagement event.
Okay. And you'll handle the register notice and all of that, right? You bet.
Yes.
I would just want to be real clear to the participants, like what we will do with their testimony, so they know what we're promising them and what our limitations.
I think that I agree. And I think our goal, is to be able to share. So there's a goal, our goal will be to share it, with the council for the first month. Bernie's point is the one. But I need to learn to this name. I think we originally, said this round, the 13th and the 20th, but since then, there's been a vote to move it to the 20th. April 20th.
Is that Saturday?
Saturday, but it is also the Saturday coming off of the larger LEAs before we go to town. Yes, one break, 15th, the 19th. So.
I'm gonna say April 20th is also admitted students day for like a lot of colleges across the nation. So it might, April 20th is admitted students day for a lot of colleges across the nation, so it might affect like high schoolers, attendance. So there'll probably be out of state for spring break, but also visiting college that day.
The 13th better for folks. We also did not entertain the 6th, but we did not entertain the 6th. There are a lot of events on the 6th already, that are like public events, and it's a little too close to notice. And so we were trying to give like ample notice, pick a Saturday, and all of it. I would say, I know I have some limitations on the 13th. But I think this is the problem, we have 60 different LEAs, some will still make it on spring break.
And I think we only really have two choices. The 6th is too early, it's too close to the budget. And then the 27th is too late because they're gonna be putting pencils down on decisions. So I think it's either the 13th or 20th. And those are really the only two choices. I'm ambivalent. I know both have pros and cons to it. So whatever you decide, I'll be there.
I'm supportive and I cannot be there.
Either day.
The 13th works for me, the 20th, I'll be coming in like toward the afternoon. I think I have a flight back into DC at 12 noon, so I will.
We are looking at probably starting like midday.
Okay, second.
We're not looking at starting in the morning. It's supposed to be right now. Like, you know what I'm trying to do at 9 a.m. on a Saturday?
So definitely the 13th all day. The 20th, we do afternoon pending American Airlines shenanigans.
Yeah, I'd like to be a part of it. I can't, I'm on the 13th, on the 20th, like I said, but if like you had a conflict on the 13th or it worked better for other people, then I would be supportive of it, but just, wouldn't be able to attend on the 20th, but would be able to.
Representative Chang?
I will try to be there.
Very safe answer.
So whatever day, I will try to be there. I'm trying to get the best attendance possible. We don't have, representative bus. Which I think is for them. Other questions about the budget form and we do have one pager.
Well, my question is, I know when we did this, we put it together based on time. So are you all saying that now it's not limited to?
I feel like we should take whoever comes, like Councilmember Trayon White last year in collaboration with Brooke Pinto did like a youth forum. However, after the youth presented, or in between, there were adults who were like, we couldn't get down to the Wilson building. I actually, similar to what you did this year, I decided not to do it last year, testified at the marathon hearing, and I just went to smaller opportunities. So there were some adults who were doing like me of just trying to testify at smaller events just to get voices heard versus doing the marathon meeting. So I say take whoever comes.
You can be also part of the community.
I originally said youth Bernice, but I think we may not have enough youth that can make it, kind of given some of the constraints and the conflicts. And particularly given the extraordinary circumstances of the hearing being so overloaded and so close to the introduction of the budget. I think it would be really beneficial to give parents, and advocates another opportunity to have their voices heard. And if we're going to transmit the testimony to council in the aftermath of the hearing, I think it's best to leave it open to everybody. And the second, what Representative Reed said.
And so is there any concern that people would just do the same testimony twice? They will testify on tomorrow, and then turn around and testify the same thing in 2 weeks.
I'm fine with that, because I actually have to work during the day, so I can't hear the whole hearing. I was gonna watch that replay. But I'd be fine with hearing it the second time if they come back and want to speak to us directly. I don't think that's a bad thing.
I'm not concerned about it. I'm not concerned about it. Because I wouldn't wanna design a process to like try to spread that out of the, I mean, you know, if they didn't feel, this is the first time for them. If you ever ask questions, like, I don't, I'm not.
And I know for the form that I described, like Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Bonds were in the audience too, just listening, even though it wasn't their forum. So if there are any individuals that we might want to consider inviting, because I also know, I'm not sure how it's going to be structured the next couple of days, but like a lot of times they are in and out of the hearings themselves because they overlap. I'm not sure that's the same issue this year, but I know last year that was an issue where where council members were popping in and out, but particularly now that there is no education committee, folks are kind of floating wherever they need to go. So maybe we can just send out the invite as a courtesy.
We can share it with the council and the council staff.
And so my last point of context, we received an email today from DGS saying that they don't work on weekends.
It's nice.
It's lovely. Well, I mean, I guess the people before 41, I should be clear. Like the building people who would open up the space and set up the room. And so they need to know the exact nature of the event, even though we told them what it was, before they will approve staff to work overtime. So I just want you to know that's in the hopper. We'll be following up with them, but there's not necessarily a guarantee. They may ask us to cover those overtime charges. We'll do that. So.
I know the GR person. I'll put in a good word for it.
No, the security is a contractor they're in with the MPD if you. But the security people don't set up the, like, they don't set up all this stuff.
And we want it to be here.
Well, and I guess that's also a question of people, where you would like for it to be.
Should be the chamber.
The chamber as in like Wilton building?
No, our chamber.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was talking about the building in general at 441, or do we just have a guaranteed building that is less stressful trying to figure out a building?
Well, I think when it was mentioned in the admin committee, it was like, the building would be available and it was next to a metro.
Oh, yeah.
Because the red line is here, but no other option for clothing on that, so.
Yeah, because then we would have to consider like what it looks like to work as meeting, all the different things. And so we're trying to create an opportunity with the appropriate goods.
Gotcha.
And we know for a fact we can broadcast it, you like to thank all the technology, at least how we do our public.
Cool beans.
I hear some conversations slowing down. All right, happy to go into the high school level update.
Yeah, thanks. So, there's a lot going on with that. Thank you to, the staff and everyone for supporting in ways that you have. Essentially, right now, the main push is to, reach out to our respective schools and encourage participation. We have two big in-person trainings. The first was today. That was why I was late. We had 4 or 5 schools that took teams. The goal is to be able to have like a faculty advisor and like a small team of students that are, really leading the efforts, but there's a lot that we're still like kind of figuring out about this process, because historically, like the Board of Elections will coordinate one day, and like if that happens, then it could be a nice convening method in which a principal can bring like an entire grade or group of eligible students. And while that has happened in certain schools, it's not the main method that we're using right now. Like students, Taya and Michaela, like still would love to figure out like who from Banneker and Basis can be a part of it. And then also, I can plan to follow up with y'all about how the SAC wants to be involved. But we had a couple schools today, and then there's another training next Wednesday, which is the big push, the in-person push at the Wilson Building. So if you can reach out to your schools, really just finding like a point person to help get people to register. If they can't make the in-person training next Wednesday, then there are virtual trainings offered every week. So that was included in the announcement, and it's also included in the sign-up form. So like one way or another, we just want to try to meet schools and students where they're at, but encourage more broader participation.
So you have to do the training to participate or no?
I think that's a good question. I would have like highly encouraged. I don't know if it's mandatory. I mean, you can students can register to vote. So like, it's not like we're not gonna restrict people from registering, but I think in terms of supporting best practices and just making sure it's structural, it'd be helpful, because the thing that we're tabling for the moment, but trying to push forward eventually is like, how do we measure this? Because we kind of hit a gap between OSSI and the Board of Elections with a simple way to measure it. So I think that's part of what's also being covered in the training, is like figuring out how students want to best register their peers, and then figuring out how principals can also tally who's registered from each individual school.
So I shared with principals, but it could be anybody at a school. It could be the point person.
Yeah, we're trying to contact, it could be a social studies teacher, it could be the head of National Honor Society, it could be student government, head of culture, really could be anyone. Just because, anyone at any particular time could have a lot on their plate, so we're just trying to figure out what can gain traction. So, so thank you to everyone who sent those emails. If you know people, if you could in the next couple of days, could reach out to more schools in your ward or people that it'd be greatly appreciated to push for the most participation that we could have next Wednesday, at the council. It's from 5 to 7 at the Wilson Building.
Is that gonna be
Any-
an email? So
What?
is that gonna be an email? Are you gonna send that information or is it already by email?
It's in there.
Okay, cool. I just need some step by step, like deadlines. What do you want me to do right now? What can wait? What's the end of the
Yeah, I
initiative?
think like,
Okay,
if you could send the email by the end of the week,
okay, that's
Yeah,
helpful for me.
yeah. End of the week.
Oh my goodness.
so that, we still give schools a couple more days early next week to
Okay.
sign up. It's not like there's a deadline for signing up. Students and staff just need to show up. But yeah, if you could send up by the end of the week, that'd be really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or needs or thoughts?
Truancy resolution. The truancy resolution, we still have, no committee consent. We discussed in our leadership meeting, so it's not at the last working session, sending the resolution, to the SAC. And Darren has recirculated the resolution, for feedback. The resolution is reflective of the past, and and any member feedback, Darren compiled, and so therefore presented out when I was not. It should not have been on the agenda at our last public meeting because it did not go before the SAC. And all resolutions are required to go and look at. Yes. So, the resolution largely unchanged, outside of, it's largely unchanged, because we'd already incorporated Representative Chang feedback. I saw feedback, and some questions from Representative Henderson today, but want to invite further feedback. I will note that when we did our performance oversight testimony, we were asked about this resolution, and so that draft was shared with the council. We did not know at that point in time that more council members requested that resolution were going to be interested in bills. And so we at least want to put a point on this so we can share it out. Doesn't mean we can never have another conversation about truancy or attendance again. But we do want to capture at least the bright spots that we have seen from that panel and any suggestions to this point and share it out in preparation for those conversations. Do folks have thoughts, questions?
I added a point of comment on the resolution during the meeting, which was, I think there is a note about having a month dashboard or a display for a month of like what the matrix are related to attendance. And I think I added, if we can maybe add, instead of just 1 month, like maybe a year. Like for instance, I'm gonna use my Pepco example. Pepco shows me, I can look at a year to see what my spikes are. It helps me year to year, what my spikes are and what my outliers, what days, my months are really low. So I'm curious if we can, that dynamic board that's asked for a month, if it can be maybe like a year or 6 months, something more than just like we just see the 1 month, because we're not able to determine was the outlier, what was the comparison from year to year. So I'm just asking if we add more months, so like a year span on that data display.
Yeah, I will say.
That's a question that the dashboard was for each school.
It was, I can't remember the line item, but there's a note, or one of the line items is something like OSCE will have a dynamic data display that shows like a month worth of truancy data. And I was suggesting instead maybe a month show a greater span, 12 months maybe, so you can at least see January, and then it kind of keeps ticking along. That way you can see trends, was my suggestion. But overall, the resolution, I think, hit a lot of the points that we we're trying to capture, so I'm good with.
I was gonna say that the call out around the month, was particular to the fact that I provided a report, but it's only 1 year. As opposed to, months, and so, I actually think that that request would go beyond what OSCE is providing currently. It will be additive, but also like that's the reason focus on a month and not a year. Cause it like currently OSCE doesn't provide any reporting. So that's not I'm not thinking that, like, I think, yes, it's a good thing, but I'm also like sharing some of the context. Of,
Yeah, and when I say a year, I'm not saying like the cumulative for a year, I'm saying like January, February, March, like almost in like a.
Yes. this is
Okay,
like
we're
the
talking about the
full
same
year.
thing.
And yes, but I'm saying currently OSCE does an annual report on truancy, and they don't do anything at a more timely clip. And so yes, that it should be both. The thoughts and suggestions. This also, like all other things, will remain open until we have to post our draft for bylaws deadlines. But also it is going to that, so I guess I'm going to that SXE. I'm trying to make sure I'm at the SXE meeting. But want to invite members again to provide further thoughts from that. One resolution.
I guess my other question at this point, so what are next steps?
So, Darren, we shared the resolution today, so you all have a SharePoint version of it. If you have thoughts or feedback, you should add that to the SharePoint resolution, just like we do with everything else. And so like Representative Green's comment is in there. Representative Peterson's comments from today are in there. Representative Shane's comments have already been incorporated, so the last one, you guys, so you won't see those. But it's the same. It's always like having a reading on there. Wanted to make sure it was at the top of the folks. Yes, they do that further.
Right, but after the feedback. The time frame of like, yeah, what?
So we go to the FXD meeting is always it will be on Monday, it's Monday, right? Cause that's a standing meeting. So ideally, feedback before the FXD meeting, it's ideal, so we can present the full thing, and technically we can make addition, I mean, if they have feedback or there's other feedback, we can continue to make changes up until Friday of the 12th, which is when we always have to show materials.
And then.
And that's just our standard timelines, yeah.
But I believe the question is, will it be on the vote for approval at the public meeting?
Is
Is that our goal?
That is the goal.
Okay. Clear.
Running out of state.
Yeah. I got you.
Other thoughts, feedback, questions? Right, dual enrollment.
As I see people running out of steam, I hope these won't be too controversial, the two that I have coming up. One is just a commitment on equity as it revolves around dual enrollment programming. Just want to make sure that the resolution that I'm asking basically is to make a stronger commitment to expansion of dual enrollment opportunities, particularly east of the river, which includes in-person cohort-based dual enrollment courses at LEAs and college campuses. Collection of academic outcomes, data on dual enrollment participation, and clear display on the DC report card is something that they're asking. Yeah, but they're asking for it. The group that I'm working with. External marketing of dual enrollment opportunities, DC public schools and public charter schools. I know I see a lot of it for DCPS. You don't see a lot of it for charter schools. And we know East of the River has an abundance of charter schools as well. But we don't talk about them. We usually do a lot of programming and we talk about one sector as opposed to one. I want to make sure that we have a commitment from both sectors. and incentivizing, employers to hire DC students, high demand, high wage careers. So that's the gist of it, like, there's other parts that we've talked about and everything, but basically it's a commitment, a resolution about commitment to dual enrollment opportunities, specifically East of the River. That's just.
What's the downside?
So there are any, sir, just to be honest with you. We just want to make sure, just like with any other courses, any other opportunities, that we're being equitable about that we're trying to make sure we hold people accountable through offering it regardless of what your zip code is. So that's it.
No, I'm in support of it. I think one thing I would want to hopefully include in it, and that I've heard repeatedly from my college counselor and from another couple college counselors, is that like, just like we do bridge programs from like 8th to 9th grade to get kids prepared for high school, like there's a really, it's important for creating pathways from like 12th grade to whatever the next step is. And I don't think UDC allows for students to enroll in like particular training and vocational programs while they're still in 12th grade. So there's like, I don't know, it's just something that I'm more flagging and hoping to potentially include here, because I've heard it repeatedly from like our college council year after year, is like, if we can get, you know, kids already enrolled in vocational things that they're interested in, not to track students, but for kids who are like, that's what they want to do, you know, to help open up that pathway, then it delays like having this gap in the summer where, you know, they might start working and then not enroll in school in the fall. So, just something that I hope maybe we can look into to be a part of that.
Yep, we have that discussion.
Yeah.
Or even a gap in the school year. I ran into a few years ago, young lady who was a senior in Anacostia High School, but she literally had all her credits, so she was not engaged. She was actually trying to find something engaged, but to engage in, so I don't make it like, but technically she had nothing to do except for walk across the stage. And I'm like, this is a whole opportunity of things you can do in this meantime. And she was actually looking for some things, but so that's interesting. And then what was that middle point about? I'm also thinking about, proximity to the dual enrollment program. So like I know we have a UDC satellite campus in Ward 8, but I'm just curious of like how easily is it to access, like where are students going to get these courses? Because my guess is if you make me travel a certain amount distance, my attendance or my participation may not be as great as a student who's like right there. I was having a conversation with somebody about, really, it was like a pathway program for education almost. And they were like, oh yeah, American. And I'm like, I don't even like driving to American, let alone being a high school student trying to get up there, you know? So I'm just curious about like proximity for our ward to get our students there. Also knowing just with regular attendance issues in school buildings, let alone I also want to get into a dual enrollment program, so.
And that could be a larger discussion as we consider it. I definitely get what you're saying. I went to America. I hate driving up there as well.
I just went to my friend's dissertation defense and I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, they were just a couple weeks ago, so I was with you. But we want to just try to make sure that they do have that opportunity. And we can try to work out the logistics of what that means as far as what schools they're enrolled with. But just providing that opportunity for schools that don't right now offer it to the students. It just does a big disparity because you see the gap it plays itself out as far as who attends college, when they finish college. Like we're looking at 8% basically of 9th graders finishing college at this particular point. That's a stat that was said, you know, in the state of school. So we want to make sure that we're giving them every opportunity to get adjusted, see what that's like. So that's the resolution that particular.
But one more just operational question is who are the organizations or community leaders or individuals that we need to engage to make sure that that's reflected in the resolution, and then operationally, who is responsible for fulfilling the resolution?
I will say this, group is trying to work with also a council member who's also going to want to introduce it as well. So it's like on a dual track. It is our previous, from what I understand, it is our previous president, Parker, that's also working with the same group. as far as introducing it.
So for us, will this go through a committee?
Yes, sir. We'll put it through the whole process and everything as the SOP state. That's why I wanted to introduce it here so that we can start that process.
So just schedule your committee meetings.
But also just that, so the remind people of the process. So at this time, there needs to be a vote to remand it to a particular committee. So that needs to happen, and then the committee can discuss it with the goal of having it on the main public agenda.
So for me, that would be the college career and black grades committee. As I look at the board and look at things, we concentrate on things that would be remanded to that particular.
That wasn't a formal motion, but.
That's, I might go. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Is that
I don't think.
You just put I move in front of whatever you just said.
I move that.
I think we left it to the president to.
Yeah, I think I think we'll decide, I'll refer.
Okay, you'll refer. Thanks, man. The second week, the next one.
Quality education simple, right?
All right, I don't know how many people know about what Mahara is. Folks who know what the business name is about. Mahara Fellowship, and it basically deals with a lot of leaders that go to Denver. It used to be Aspen Mahara, but now it's just Mahara. They've kind of disconnected from the aspects, and you study different issues. Okay, during my time there, I'm currently a fellow at Mahara, and the discussion came up about quality education as a civil right between some of the students. And one of the members who actually leads this in California, and he approached me. He actually was in the same class as Dr. Grant when she went through Mahara at a particular time, a couple of cohorts before mine, and started playing with the issue of basically what does it mean to get a quality education and that being a civil right. And I was discussing with you that this was proposed previously some time ago, but it kind of died. And if you could tell people what you just told me.
Well, yeah, when we were just talking casually, like, it just made me think about, Bob Moses's work as a math educator during the civil rights movement, when we were trying to push for a constitutional amendment to make education civil rights, so, exactly, yeah. And, then, kind of there was some momentum initially, but then he got killed and dwindled in the house in the 70s and 80s. I just was connecting that history and issue with England.
Right. So along the same lines is that when I was talking to who are in my cohort, it was basically like the school board would kind of introduce it as a resolution, hoping that the council as our legislative body will also adopt it as a civil right. And then it would basically, like any state would kind of make it a constitutional right to get in the District of Columbia as if we're a state in our home rule or whatever, how we would pass it, but to make getting quality education a civil right issue. So that's a theory around it.
So some states do have,
One state has passed it. I don't know which state it is, I forget which state it is, but one state has passed it as part of their constitution. That, quality education is a civil right.
there are, yes, there's a, there might be more than one though.
Okay.
I believe there's more than one state that actually does have this written into their state constitution. I mean, I don't know how folks are trying to like that with initiatives and all the things, but, what I don't know, and I don't know who needs to provide language around, is if this is saying like we're amending, we're pushing for the council to amend the home, to push for amendments to the Rule Act, or if there's some other pathway that would like suggest exploring to amend home rule, but we're special.
And that was the particular nuance about it, that we are, in this particular case, not a state, so the ability to do this is a little bit easier lift for us. How we do it, because we're working directly with our council, with our mayor, to get this passed, as opposed to legislatures and states and what they have to go through and all the debate that goes that happens. So, it's still kind of fresh and everything like that, but I did want to put it on the agenda. I know there's a lot of information that has to go into this, like what defines a high quality education, what this means legally, as you were stating, and how that's defined, because then you do bring.
Everybody getting sued.
Yeah, then you do bring up the issue of what it's like when somebody says, well, I didn't get a high quality education. So what does that mean? Can I sue the District of Columbia because I didn't get it? So I know there's some parts to flesh out, so to speak, that out. But just wanted to put it on the agenda to start that particular work. And then I know Madam Chair that you would put it in, get the meeting for us to start working through, but wanted to start talking about what that would look like in resolution from State Board of Education as a civil rights quality.
I'm generally supportive of this. I think what I would wonder, and then also just thinking ahead to what work we have on our plate. We have less stuff probably like from us in the next 6 months, like what does it look like to get the input to have a definition? I think that's something we should think about. And like what is the process to get to that? What does that look like this? Not like by yourself, but I'm just saying as part of the consideration.
Of my neighbors, who has some history in it, just work with as well.
Yeah. I mean, the teeth of it is gonna be in what the council has been doing, right? So I think we can show support, for if that is a consensus here, but also looking at or figuring out what states have done and what they've said and, you know, just getting some context and not rereading all of.
Right. And I have some of that information, as I'm looking at it right now, but, so I can share that out as it goes through its process.
Yeah, I think, now that we know, I guess, but my push, is to make a decision about how much we want to own, and how much we want to. I think there's a difference between writing a resolution to say someone else should figure it out versus this is what we think it is. And if it's the latter,
I think it's loud.
then that's actually different, right? And so,
I think we designed the framework, knowing that the process that it has to go through, what we say, what it is, fine, terminology that needs to be in there.
then, okay. Other discussion on this or? So is that gonna go? Also. Sure. Well, it will have to, but I just wanted to make sure it was out. It's okay for me, it's okay, I still want.
That's why I think it remained in the game.
Okay, so, if it's, well. I'm not sure where this fits. I mean, I guess it could go to. It could go to college career and life readiness, or it could go to student experience and engagement, or do we just need like a work group around this? Do you all want to come up with a proposal and like a work plan?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't necessarily have to go to one of these things, but I.
I'll share you the SOPs, but I'm open to all of you.
Well, given that you're not trying to. It sounds like the board wants to take this up. And I can pick a committee to remain into, or, since, you know, it's not moving this month. You can say to me, hey, here's like, you want to give us some thought, like what the process looks like, so we can pick a better fit. Or in case we need to like create a different vehicle like we did with the bylaws and SOPs.
It makes perfect sense, and I'm going to back.
Okay.
I'll actually meet with some of the individuals next week or so, to discuss how this shit works itself out. And what other states have done, using their example, as you said, don't create the wheel.
Yeah.
The mess of this.
Yeah, it's better, okay.
Okay,
What
so
that range looks like.
I will vote with that.
Okay. Okay.
All right. That is all the items I have on this list for new business. I just want to follow one thing I really. No, because I have not, what I said that I'm gonna follow up with Representative Glass and Representative Lewis. We're trying to get that. Yes. The deadline for public representation is tomorrow. So I just want, you know, to share everything, so I want to share with you all.
And I can send, based on our notes, like who said they were available on which date.
Anything else? Yes.
Just a information about literacy in the budget is that there is 2 million for a piece of the literacy task force recommendations focused on high quality instructional materials, which I think is an actual super helpful thing to fund. It is framed as an enhancement, so if, you know, I think the surest way to get it through is for all the council members to understand why that's important. It's pretty wonky in terms of an ask, right? And so if you are talking with your council member about it, would appreciate your help to clarify what it is for and why it's important. And it's one of the 4 recommendations that were requested that it is being funded. So at some point, I think, well, now I think is the time to also push for the rest of it to be funded. The main loss right now is throughout the process of providing training for educators, we've been able to provide a $1,000 stipend. That's being cut, which I think will make it much harder for teachers to be able to complete any of these trainings. So that's a big one. And then the sort of dream ask that we included in the task force recs that is also not included is coaches. So.
I was just gonna say, a couple of us are giving testimony tomorrow. Could you write us up something?
Yes.
So that, and I will do my best to include it.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
So I want to make sure I understand. It makes sense to me to do the 2 million for HPI admins and enhancement, those to be one-time costs. What I don't understand is that there is no money at all for what I'm just going to encompass as professional recruiting, which would include coaches, but also other attorneys.
So there is a TNTP expense that we made with ESSER funds that allows for a not dynamic, but we have a platform where any teacher can do the 25-hour TNTP training and take their assessment for no additional cost for the district. That is not the ideal way that we provide the training
and the licenses.
Exactly. So we have those. It seems to be customized for us, so we have it long-term.
Okay.
That is not right. I still would advocate for DC Reading Clinic style training as the gold standard here, or letters. I will take this as an option. Having talked with some reading instructors who went through it all the way and who liked it and said at least it was something that was helpful. So I think it is not the ideal ask in a tough budget year. I think, yes, we should be asking for more funds for DC Reading Clinic. There should be a better training. I think the main barrier is going to be how do we support teachers to actually take the training
Okay.
that we already have funded.
I just want to make sense of how these are fit together. Happy to talk more about it.
Thank you.
These are Aussie things. These are all
Aussie things. Yep.
Will you send this to?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna take this up. I think be 2 hours.
All right. I don't see anything else under new business.
Is there anything else to do? Right, hearing none, I want to thank members for their time and engagement tonight. Our next public meeting, will be held on Wednesday, at 7:00 in the Old Council Chamber, Capitol, 41 4th Street Northwest. Seeing no further business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. This meeting of the state board is adjourned at 8:33 p.m.
All in favor? All in favor?
Oh, yeah, y'all are in favor, right? We're all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
I figure anytime we're adjourning before 10 o'clock, y'all are in favor.